What if the American Revolution, the war that gave birth to a nation, was not as straightforward as we've been told? Beyond the battles and declarations lies a shadowy world of unanswered questions, lost documents, and events that defy explanation. Whispers of secret societies moving behind the scenes, hidden codes buried in letters that changed the course of history, unmarked graves on forgotten battlefields, their occupants never identified. Imagine messages vanishing before they could be delivered, or maps showing places that officially never existed. Some accounts suggest phantom armies that appeared and disappeared without a trace. Others speak of strange lights on the battlefield, seen by soldiers who could never agree on what they had witnessed. Were these coincidences of war, or something deeper, something carefully concealed? The revolution is remembered as a fight for freedom. But behind the familiar narrative lingers an unsettling truth. Not everything has been explained. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the hidden mysteries of the American Revolution. Mysteries that continue to haunt history itself. Beneath the calm, shifting waters of New York Harbor, in the late summer of 1776, an invention unlike anything the world had ever seen prepared to make its mark on history. It was called the Turtle, a small, one-man submarine constructed of oak and reinforced with iron bands, shaped to resemble two halves of a walnut shell joined together. Crude by modern standards, yet revolutionary for its time, this strange machine represented both ingenuity and desperation. The young colonies, vastly outnumbered and undersupplied, needed a weapon that could level the playing field against the mighty British fleet. And so, in secret, the first American submarine was born. The Turtle was the creation of David Bushnell, a Yale graduate with a mind for mechanics and a quiet determination to use science as a weapon of war. Powered by hand-cranked propellers, guided by a single occupant, and armed with an explosive charge meant to be attached beneath an enemy vessel, the submarine was both bold and perilous. At its heart was a simple idea: strike the British where they were untouchable, below the surface. Historical records tell us that the Turtle made its most famous attempt on the night of September 6, 1776. Sergeant Ezra Lee, chosen for his strength and courage, maneuvered the wooden craft beneath the waves toward the HMS Eagle, the flagship of the British fleet anchored in New York Harbor. His mission was clear: bore into the ship's hull and fasten an explosive charge. Yet something went wrong. Whether it was the iron sheathing of the ship's hull, the currents of the harbor, or the sheer difficulty of piloting such an untested device, Lee was unable to secure the charge. Pursued by British patrol boats, he released the explosive into the water and escaped into the night. From there, the story begins to blur. Some accounts claim the Turtle was used in a handful of subsequent missions, though none met with success. British commanders reported seeing infernal machines in the water, but rarely with detail, leaving historians to wonder how many times Bushnell's submarine actually took to the harbor. What became of the Turtle after these missions is one of the enduring mysteries of the American Revolution. Some reports suggest the craft was lost when the sloop carrying it was sunk by British fire in October of 1776. Others insist Bushnell retrieved it and kept it hidden, later dismantling it to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. Strangely, there is no definitive record of its fate. Unlike many relics of the Revolution, flags, muskets, or uniforms carefully preserved, the Turtle simply vanished from the historical stage. Theories abound. One possibility is that the submarine lies buried beneath the silt of the Hudson River or Long Island Sound, its wooden hull long since decayed but its iron fittings still hidden in the mud. Some divers and amateur historians claim to have searched for it, convinced that remnants might still be found. Yet no verified discovery has ever been made. Another idea is that Bushnell, wary of ridicule or exposure, may have destroyed the craft himself. The secrecy surrounding the project was intense. Only a handful of men knew of its construction, and Washington himself spoke of it only sparingly. Could Bushnell have believed that the world was not ready to understand or accept such a machine, and therefore chose to erase its traces? More speculative theories go further still. Some suggest that the turtle was never truly lost, but hidden, perhaps preserved in a private collection or stored away in forgotten military archives. Stories occasionally surface of unusual sketches, unidentified relics, or rumors of replicas mistaken for originals. Each clue, when examined, dissolves back into uncertainty. There are even accounts, half legend and half whisper, of other submarine-like devices appearing later in the war, as if the design had been secretly refined or replicated. Were these the work of Bushnell continuing in silence, or were other inventors drawing inspiration from what they had heard? Documentation is scarce, and much of it is anecdotal, but the echoes of possibility linger. In later years, Bushnell himself retreated into obscurity. After the war, he disappeared from the public eye, resurfacing only decades later under an assumed name in Georgia. Why did a man of such vision and ambition choose to hide from the world? Was it disillusionment, exhaustion, or perhaps the burden of knowing too much about technologies the age was not yet prepared to embrace? As with many mysteries of the Revolution, the silence surrounding the turtle may be as telling as the fragments that survive. We know it existed. We know it was deployed. But beyond those facts, we are left with gaps, spaces where history does not speak. Could fragments of it still lie beneath the waters of New York Harbor, waiting to be uncovered by chance? Or was it deliberately erased, its pieces scattered, its memory reduced to rumor and speculation? The unknown fate of the turtle reminds us that the Revolution was not only a clash of armies, but also a crucible of invention and secrecy. Some innovations emerged to shape the future. Others slipped away, leaving only questions. And so, the first American-made submarine, a machine that could have changed the face of naval warfare, remains elusive. Lost to the sea, dismantled by its maker, or hidden away in silence, its story is unfinished. Perhaps somewhere in the quiet depths of history, the turtle still waits. From the quiet depths of the harbor where the turtle vanished into history, we move inland, into the forests and towns of New England, where another mystery unfolded during the Revolutionary years. This one was not man-made, at least not in any conventional sense. It was a phenomenon so unsettling, so sudden, that it silenced entire communities and sent fear rippling across the colonies. It came to be remembered simply as the Dark Day. The date was May 19th, 1780. Morning broke as usual across the countryside of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and parts of New Hampshire. Farmers rose with the sun, tending their fields, while townsfolk carried on with their daily routines. Yet, as the hours passed, something unusual began to stir in the skies. A heavy gloom crept over the land, as though a storm were building. But there was no thunder, no lightning, only an encroaching darkness that thickened hour by hour. By late morning, day had become indistinguishable from night. Birds fell silent, confused and restless. Chickens, believing night had arrived, returned to their roosts. Cows wandered back toward their barns, and men and women, bewildered, lit candles in broad daylight. Eyewitnesses described the scene in language that still chills us centuries later. The darkness was not uniform. In some areas, it was deep enough that people claimed they could not see their hand before their face. In others, a strange reddish hue tinted the gloom, giving it the appearance of a world caught between day and night, earth and fire. Newspapers reported that the air itself seemed heavy, filled with an unfamiliar scent, while rivers and lakes reflected an eerie, copper-colored glow. In an era steeped in religion and uncertainty, many believed they were witnessing the end of days. Ministers gave impromptu sermons, calling for repentance. Ordinary citizens gathered in homes and churches, some weeping, others praying. The Connecticut legislature in session that day debated whether to adjourn. One delegate, Abraham Davenport, is remembered for his steady response. The day of judgment is either approaching or it is not. If it is not, there is no cause for adjournment. If it is, I choose to be found doing my duty. His words became a lasting emblem of courage in the face of the unknown. But what caused the dark day of 1780? Scientists and historians have offered a number of explanations, some more convincing than others. One theory points to massive forest fires in the north, particularly in what is now Canada. The combination of thick smoke, fog, and heavy cloud cover could have created the extraordinary conditions experienced in New England. Supporting this idea, rings from trees in that region show signs of fire damage in that same year. Another explanation involves atmospheric anomalies, unusual patterns of fog, humidity, and wind that might have intensified the effects of smoke and shadow. Yet even these ideas cannot fully account for the extent of the darkness described. Why did it vary so widely from place to place? Why did the darkness persist for hours, rather than lifting quickly as one might expect? Some accounts also note the strange color of the rain that fell during the dark day, described as sooty, even resembling ink. Was this a direct deposit of ash from distant fires, or something less easily explained? Over time, more speculative ideas have emerged. Could a volcanic eruption, perhaps on another continent, have been responsible? Large eruptions are known to dim skies for months, even years. Yet no such event has been firmly identified in 1780. Others wonder whether the phenomenon might have been caused by a massive meteor or comet passing through Earth's atmosphere, scattering particles that briefly blocked out the sun. And then there are theories that move beyond natural science. Some suggest that the dark day was a manifestation of something cosmic, even supernatural, an omen tied to the revolution itself. To those living through the war, the timing may have seemed too striking to be mere coincidence. Was it a sign, as some believed, that the struggle for independence was watched by forces beyond human understanding? The mystery lingers precisely because no explanation is definitive. Smoke and fire, fog and cloud, cosmic intervention, each offers a piece of the puzzle, but none resolves it completely. Even now, with centuries of hindsight, the dark day resists easy answers. What makes this mystery endure is not only the physical phenomenon, but the way it shaped the human imagination. For those who lived through it, the event was unforgettable, an intrusion of the inexplicable into daily life. For us, it is a reminder of how fragile our sense of certainty can be, even in the face of something as constant as the rising sun. The Revolution was a time of battles and declarations, but it was also a time of shadows, moments when the ordinary world was interrupted by the unexplainable. The dark day of 1780 remains one of those moments. Was it nature at its most chaotic? A rare convergence of fire and atmosphere? Or was it something else? Something we may never fully comprehend? The question lingers still, as mysterious now as it was then. From the unnatural darkness that once blanketed New England, we turn to another event that unfolded in shadow and uncertainty, this time in the very heart of the Revolution's largest city. The year was 1776, and New York, newly captured by British forces, became the stage for one of the most destructive and mysterious fires in colonial history, a blaze that raged through the night, reducing nearly a quarter of the city to ash and leaving behind questions that have never been fully answered. Picture New York as it was then, a bustling port town of narrow streets, wooden houses, and crowded taverns, with the spires of Trinity Church rising above the waterfront. In September of 1776, British troops occupied the city after the defeat of Washington's army at the Battle of Long Island. The mood was tense, uncertain. Thousands of Loyalists, refugees, and soldiers filled the streets. The British now held control, but the war was far from decided. In this fragile moment, fire struck. On the night of September 21st, flames were first spotted near Whitehall Slip at the southern tip of Manhattan. Driven by strong winds, the blaze leapt from building to building, consuming entire blocks in minutes. The dry timbers of homes and warehouses became kindling. By dawn, nearly 500 structures were gone. Trinity Church, one of the city's most prominent landmarks, was reduced to smoldering ruins. The destruction was catastrophic, but what caused it? For the British, the answer seemed obvious. They accused rebel sympathizers of deliberate arson, claiming the fire was an attempt by Washington's forces to deny them the use of the city. Dozens of suspected patriots were rounded up, questioned, and in some cases imprisoned. To many British officers, it seemed inconceivable that such a fire could have been accidental, especially in the immediate aftermath of their victory. And yet, Washington himself denied any involvement. In his letters, he expressed both shock and sorrow at the devastation, noting that the fire had harmed ordinary civilians more than the British military. Could the Continental Army, already weakened and on the retreat, have risked such a desperate act? And if not, then who or what was responsible? Historians have long debated the possibilities. Some suggest the fire may indeed have been an act of arson, carried out by a small group of radical patriots determined to prevent the British from entrenching their hold on the city. Others argue that the blaze could have been entirely accidental. After all, 18th century cities were highly vulnerable to fire. Wooden construction, open flames for cooking and heating, and tightly packed neighborhoods created the perfect conditions for disaster. In this view, the Great Fire of 1776 may have been nothing more than a tragic accident, magnified by high winds and poor access to water. But there are details that complicate the picture. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen multiple points of fire break out simultaneously in different parts of the city, suggesting coordination rather than chance. Some accounts describe British soldiers catching individuals in the act of setting buildings alight. Were these rumors spread in the chaos of the moment, or genuine fragments of truth? More speculative theories go further. Some have wondered whether the fire was deliberately set by factions within the British Army itself, perhaps as a pretext to crack down on Patriot sympathizers, or as a ruthless way of clearing the overcrowded city. Others, though less widely accepted, hint at the possibility of a deeper conspiracy. A fire meant not only to destroy, but to erase certain evidence, documents, or supplies hidden within the city's maze of streets. What is striking is how little is truly known. Despite its scale, the fire left behind almost no definitive answers. The chaos of war, the scarcity of reliable records, and the tendency of both sides to use the event as propaganda only deepened the uncertainty. Was it a patriot act of resistance, a tragic accident, or something else entirely? Even today, the ruins of that night haunt the imagination. The charred remains of Trinity Church were rebuilt, but the memory of its collapse lingered for decades. The fire reshaped the city's skyline, leaving scars that endured well beyond the Revolution. And yet the central question remains unanswered. What really happened on that September night? Was the fire a desperate act of sabotage, an accident of circumstance, or a crime lost to history? As with the dark day of 1780, the truth remains elusive. In moments like these, the Revolution seems less like a story of clear battles and victories, and more like a web of shadows, events that slip just out of reach, leaving us to wonder what forces, human or otherwise, might have been at work. The flames that consumed New York in 1776 may have long since died out, but the mystery of their origin still smolders quietly, waiting for answers that may never come. From the smoldering ruins of New York, where fire left more questions than answers, we turn now to the quiet halls of Congress, where mystery takes the form not of flames or shadows, but of missing words. In June of 1776, before the Declaration of Independence was signed, a different document carried equal, if not greater, weight: the Lee Resolution. Proposed by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, it was the first bold call for complete independence from Britain. Its adoption set the stage for Jefferson's famous declaration. Yet strangely, the earliest versions of this resolution, drafts, notes, even fragments, have disappeared. Picture the setting: Philadelphia, the Pennsylvania State House, now known as Independence Hall. Delegates gathered in sweltering rooms, debating not only war and taxation, but the very idea of breaking away from the crown. On June 7th, Lee rose and introduced his resolution: that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. The words were radical, incendiary. They were the spark that would ignite a nation. But here lies the mystery. For all the care given to preserving revolutionary documents, the earliest drafts of the Lee Resolution are absent from the record. What happened to them? We know the resolution was debated fiercely. Some delegates were eager to act, while others hesitated, fearing it was too soon. John Adams wrote passionately in favor of it. Committees were formed, edits were made, and yet, despite the normal practice of archiving congressional papers, the original wording introduced by Lee, the very text that first called for independence, no longer exists. Historians have reconstructed the resolution only from later versions and references in letters, but the path from Lee's introduction to Congress's final adoption remains murky. Was the original draft misplaced, destroyed, or deliberately concealed? The most straightforward explanation is clerical loss. In the confusion of war, with Congress constantly on the move, it is possible that the earliest papers were simply misplaced or damaged. After all, other documents from the period were lost to fire, carelessness, or time. Could the Lee Resolution have been another casualty of a chaotic era? Yet others find this unsatisfying. Congress kept meticulous records of other proceedings, debates, petitions, even minor committee notes. Why then would such a pivotal resolution vanish almost completely from the archive? Some have speculated about deliberate suppression. Could it be that the original wording was too radical, or contained sentiments that later delegates wished to erase from memory? Perhaps it addressed not only independence, but issues of governance, alliances, or slavery, subjects so contentious they might have threatened fragile unity. If so, might someone have chosen to quietly remove the draft, ensuring that posterity remembered only the cleaner, more unified version? More speculative theories suggest foreign intrigue. The Continental Congress was under constant surveillance from British sympathizers. Could spies have removed or destroyed key papers, hoping to disrupt or delay the march toward independence? If so, the disappearance of the Lee Resolution's earliest form would have been a calculated blow, striking at the very heart of the revolution's political foundation. And then there are the stories that verge on the legendary. Some claim the drafts still exist, hidden in private collections, locked away in trunks or archives, waiting to be rediscovered. Over the years, rumors have surfaced of unsigned manuscripts resembling the Lee Resolution, found in estate sales or personal papers, only to vanish again into obscurity. Were these authentic remnants, or simply forgeries born of wishful thinking? The truth is, we cannot know. What we do know is that the Lee Resolution, though less celebrated than the Declaration of Independence, was the true legal break with Britain. Without it, Jefferson's declaration would have been little more than rhetoric. The missing drafts are not just lost papers. They are missing steps in the creation of a nation. What might those vanished words have revealed? Were they merely rough drafts of what we already know, or could they have contained arguments, promises, or warnings that might reshape our understanding of the revolution itself? Did someone, at some point, decide that history would be cleaner, more unified without them? As with so many mysteries of the era, the disappearance of the Lee Resolution's earliest versions leaves us with silence where there should be clarity. In that silence lies a reminder. Even the birth of a nation was not a perfectly illuminated moment, but a process full of shadows, missing lines, and unanswered questions. The debates of 1776 gave rise to independence, but in the absence of these first drafts, we are left to wonder. What words were spoken, what ideas were considered that never reached us, and what might still be waiting, tucked away in some forgotten chest, to rewrite the story we think we know. From the vanished words of the Lee Resolution, we move to another disappearance, this time not of ideas, but of maps. Maps that once charted the defenses of one of the Revolution's most vital waterways. The Hudson River, winding from the Adirondacks down through New York to the sea, was more than a river during the war. It was a lifeline, a dividing line, a potential dagger pointed at the very heart of the rebellion. To control the Hudson was to control the connection between New England and the rest of the colonies. And for that reason, its defenses were drawn, measured, and carefully guarded on parchment. Yet today, some of the most important maps of those defenses are missing. Imagine the Hudson in the late 1770s. Its waters glisten beneath steep cliffs, dotted with forts, blockhouses, and floating obstructions. Chains stretched across the river, massive iron links designed to stop British ships. At West Point, engineers designed elaborate earthworks, redoubts, and hidden batteries. Every curve of the river, every elevation of ground was measured and marked by military surveyors. These maps were the blueprint of American defense. We know they existed. Continental engineers, including men like Rufus Putnam and Louis de la Rodière, spent countless hours surveying the terrain. George Washington himself placed extraordinary importance on the Hudson, insisting that its security was second only to that of the Army itself. Orders survive, correspondence survives, and references to these maps are scattered through letters and reports. And yet, the maps themselves, or at least many of the earliest and most detailed, are gone. What became of them? The simplest explanation is that they were lost in the chaos of war. Documents were moved constantly as the Continental Congress shifted locations, as armies marched and retreated, as forts fell. Fires, damp conditions, or hurried escapes might easily have destroyed fragile sheets of parchment. But the disappearance is more puzzling because less significant documents from the same period remain intact. Why not these? Another possibility is deliberate destruction. The Hudson defenses were among the most sensitive military secrets of the Revolution. If there was even a chance of the maps falling into British hands, commanders might have ordered them burned. After all, in the wrong possession, they could reveal every weakness, every blind spot. Was this a calculated act of protection, destroying the very knowledge that had been so carefully gathered? And yet, fragments suggest something more. Surviving British archives contain sketches of the Hudson River fortifications, evidence that at least some of the American designs did reach the enemy. How? Were the maps captured in battle? Stolen by spies? Or given over deliberately, perhaps by those whose loyalty was less than certain? Here, the shadow of Benedict Arnold looms large. Before his betrayal, Arnold held command at West Point, the very fortress guarding the Hudson. His correspondence with the British included detailed descriptions of its defenses. Some scholars argue that Arnold may have passed on more than words, that he may have provided or arranged for actual maps. If so, could these be among the missing documents? And if Arnold gave them to the enemy, what became of them afterward? Speculation has not stopped there. Some suggest that the missing maps were not destroyed, but hidden, locked away in private hands, preserved by families of officers or surveyors, then forgotten in attics and trunks. Over the centuries, fragments have surfaced, small sketches, incomplete charts, but the full, detailed master maps remain elusive. Others, more speculative still, wonder if the disappearance was intentional in another sense, not just to keep them from the British, but to keep them from posterity. Could it be that the maps revealed something embarrassing? Design flaws, abandoned fortifications, or even contradictions in the official story of the defenses? If so, someone in authority may have decided that it was better if they simply vanished from the record. And then there is the most intriguing possibility that some of these maps still exist, tucked away in forgotten archives, mislabeled or overlooked. Libraries and historical societies occasionally unearth unexpected treasures from the Revolutionary era. What if one day, among the dust and leather bindings, the lost Hudson maps were to appear again? The mystery deepens because the Hudson itself has changed so little. The cliffs, bends, and ridges remain much as they were when the surveyors walked its banks. To hold a missing map in hand today would be to see the river as Washington's engineers once saw it, a landscape of danger and opportunity, marked by careful lines of ink and guarded secrets. So we are left to ask, were the maps destroyed in the fires of war, captured by the enemy, or hidden away by design? Do they lie in fragments, scattered across private collections? Or do they still wait intact, their ink faded, but their meaning undimmed? The Hudson River defenses were the backbone of the Revolution's survival. And yet, the very blueprints of those defenses, the maps that guided the hands of soldiers and engineers, are gone. Their absence is more than an archival gap. It is a silence in the record of America's founding struggle. Perhaps one day, a folded sheet of parchment will emerge from the shadows of a forgotten archive. Until then, the missing maps remain one more unanswered question, an absence that forces us to wonder what truths, what secrets might still lie hidden in the story of the Revolution. From the missing maps of the Hudson, we move deeper into New York's past, a city already marked by fire, by war, and by secrets. But among the most tantalizing mysteries of this era lies not in ink on parchment, but in gold, silver, and jewels. Whispers of Loyalist treasure chests, filled with the wealth of those who fled the Revolution, have lingered for centuries. Their fate remains uncertain, their story half remembered, half forgotten. Picture New York in 1783. The war has ended, and the British are preparing to withdraw. For years, the city had been their stronghold, the heart of Loyalist power in the colonies. Thousands of men and women who had supported the crown had taken refuge there, bringing with them property, silverware, family heirlooms, and in some cases considerable wealth. With the British defeat, these Loyalists faced an impossible choice: remain in a hostile new nation that viewed them as traitors, or leave behind their homes and possessions to seek safety under British protection. It is here that the legend begins. Accounts speak of chests of valuables, hastily gathered in the final days before evacuation. Some were said to contain coins, jewelry, or promissory notes, anything that could preserve a family's fortune. The most trusted among them loaded their treasures onto British ships, bound for Canada, the Caribbean, or England itself. But not every chest reached its destination. Reports from the time describe confusion on the docks of New York Harbor. In the rush to depart, vessels were overcrowded, supplies scarce, and records poorly kept. Some ships never arrived, vanishing in storms at sea. Others were intercepted by privateers, their cargo lost to capture. But more intriguing still are stories that some of the chests never even left New York. Loyalists, fearing theft or seizure, may have buried their wealth in cellars, wells, or along the edges of the harbor, hidden caches meant to be reclaimed one day. Yet for many, that day never came. What happened to these treasures? One explanation is simple loss. In the chaos of evacuation, with thousands fleeing at once, it is easy to imagine valuables left behind, misplaced or abandoned. The wealth of the Loyalists may have been scattered piecemeal, absorbed quietly into the life of the new republic. Another possibility lies in deliberate concealment. Some families who returned to Britain may have intended to come back for what they buried, only to find themselves unable or unwilling to return. In their absence, the locations of hidden chests may have slipped into silence, known only to those who did not survive the war. Could New York's soil, under centuries of development, still hold such relics today? Speculation has also followed darker paths. Were some of these chests seized in secret by American authorities, their contents quietly redistributed to fund the struggling new government? Could local opportunists, neighbors, soldiers, dock workers have discovered and plundered them before their owners could reclaim them? If so, the record remains quiet, as though the treasures dissolved into private hands without leaving a trace. And then there are the legends. Stories told of shadowy wagons moving through the city at night, guarded convoys transporting wealth inland, only to vanish without explanation. Tales of treasure buried along the Hudson shoreline or on the small islands that dotted New York's harbor. Even rumors of Loyalist wealth deliberately sunk in the river, intended to be recovered under cover of secrecy, but never retrieved. Each story adds to the aura of mystery, but none are confirmed. In the centuries since, fragments have surfaced. Coins uncovered in old cellars, silver marked with Loyalist crests turning up in unexpected places. Yet these finds are scattered, far from the organized treasure chests once described. Do they hint at larger caches still waiting to be found? Or are they merely the remnants of ordinary possessions, separated from their owners in the chaos of war? The possibility remains that much of the Loyalist wealth truly is gone, dispersed or destroyed. But the silence surrounding certain accounts, the missing ship manifests, the unrecorded seizures, leaves space for doubt. Why do some records of Loyalist evacuations survive in detail, while others are conspicuously absent? Were the chests simply forgotten, or deliberately hidden from history's view? As with the missing maps, what makes this mystery endure is not just the possibility of gold or silver lying beneath the city, but what these lost treasures represent. They are echoes of divided loyalties, of families torn apart, of fortunes reshaped by revolution. Their disappearance reminds us that the revolution was not only a struggle for freedom, but also a rupture in lives, property, and trust. And so the question lingers. Are New York's streets, its buried foundations, its forgotten corners, still hiding the lost chests of Loyalist treasure? Or have they long since been claimed, their story reduced to rumor? Perhaps beneath the layers of brick and stone, the secret wealth of a bygone era still waits, locked in silence, an unclaimed inheritance of a revolution that rewrote the fate of a nation. From whispers of vanished Loyalist treasure, we turn now to a different kind of wealth, one not buried in the earth, but pressed into paper. It was currency meant to give life to a revolution, and yet it became a weapon that nearly strangled it. The story of Continental money is one of ambition and desperation, but behind its rapid collapse lies a mystery that continues to raise questions. Who was truly responsible for the flood of counterfeit notes that destabilized the fledgling republic? Imagine holding one of these bills in your hand. Thin, unevenly cut paper, ink pressed in bold yet slightly imperfect strokes. On the surface, it bore the marks of legitimacy. The seal of the Continental Congress, familiar designs, mottos like "Mind your business" or "We are one." For soldiers in the field or merchants in the marketplace, this was the promise of value, backed not by gold or silver, but by faith in the revolution itself. Yet, among these bills, indistinguishable at first glance, were others born not of Congress, but of deception. Counterfeit Continental currency circulated widely during the war, undermining trust and accelerating inflation. By 1781, the expression "not worth a Continental" had entered common speech. But the scale of the counterfeiting operation suggests something more than the occasional forger. Some historians argue that what happened was one of the earliest cases of economic warfare in American history. We know that British officials encouraged counterfeiting. Pamphlets of the time even advertised counterfeit notes for sale, offering them to Loyalists who wished to destabilize the rebel economy. It was said that presses in occupied New York churned out false bills by the thousands, with the tacit approval of British authorities. Indeed, captured counterfeiters sometimes admitted as much under interrogation. But can this explanation alone account for the sheer volume of false currency in circulation? The mystery deepens when we look at the numbers. Estimates suggest that millions of dollars in counterfeit notes were in use, so many that they rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, the genuine issues authorized by Congress. Could British printers in New York alone have produced such staggering quantities? Or were other, less obvious sources at work? Some accounts suggest that counterfeit bills also appeared in regions far from British control. Notes surfaced in the backcountry, in areas where British influence was minimal. Who supplied these remote markets? Were there secret presses hidden within the colonies themselves, operated by opportunists willing to profit from the chaos of war? Or perhaps even by factions within the revolution, seeking to manipulate the economy for political advantage? This last possibility is particularly troubling. If some Patriot leaders believed that flooding the market with false notes could force Congress to pursue alternative funding or undermine rivals within their ranks, would they have sanctioned such a strategy in secret? No documents confirm this, yet the absence of evidence does not erase the whispers. There is also the matter of design. Some counterfeit notes were crude, easily detected by anyone familiar with the originals, but others were startlingly precise, matching the intricate details of official issues so closely that even experienced examiners struggled to tell them apart. Who had access to the materials, the engraving skill, and the knowledge required to produce such convincing forgeries? Could someone with inside information from the very halls of Congress have played a role? Speculation, of course, has extended further still. A few theories suggest that counterfeit plates may have been stolen, or even duplicated from legitimate engravers contracted by Congress. Others imagine that neutral powers, watching the revolution unfold from across the Atlantic, might have quietly supported counterfeiting efforts to prolong the conflict, weaken both Britain and the colonies, and thereby advance their own interests. The evidence remains fragmentary, scattered across financial records, court transcripts, and the memoirs of those who lived through the crisis. No single source tells the full story. Instead, we are left with an impression of shadows moving behind the flow of paper, hands unseen, striking at the fragile trust that held the economy together. By the war's end, the damage was done. Inflation had devoured the value of continental money, forcing Congress to turn increasingly to loans and foreign aid. Soldiers were often left unpaid, farmers and merchants refused paper in favor of hard coin, and ordinary citizens bore the weight of a collapsing currency. Yet the question of who, ultimately, engineered the worst of the counterfeiting remains unanswered. Was it merely a British strategy of economic sabotage, executed with ruthless efficiency? Or did hidden hands within the colonies themselves, driven by ambition or desperation, add fuel to the fire? As with so many mysteries of the Revolution, the truth lies buried beneath layers of conflicting testimony, missing records, and silence. Perhaps the counterfeiters were careful enough to cover their tracks. Perhaps those who knew the whole story chose to let it disappear into history. And so we are left to wonder, was the collapse of continental currency the inevitable result of war, mismanagement, and scarcity? Or was it shaped, in ways unseen, by secret presses and shadowed conspirators, an invisible battlefield that altered the course of the revolution itself? From the shadowy world of counterfeit notes, our attention now shifts to a different kind of disappearance, one not of money, but of memory itself. For hidden somewhere in the history of the Revolution lies a silence so profound that it continues to puzzle historians to this day: the vanishing records of the Committee of Secret Correspondence. Picture a dimly lit room in Philadelphia, late in the year 1775. Outside, the colonies are restless, torn between loyalty to the crown and the growing call for independence. Inside, behind closed doors, members of the Continental Congress gather in hushed tones. Around a wooden table sit some of the most influential figures of their age: Benjamin Franklin, Benjamin Harrison, John Dickinson, and others tasked with a mission both delicate and dangerous. Their charge is not to pass laws or draft declarations. Instead, it is to seek allies abroad, quietly, invisibly, long before the colonies dared to openly declare independence. This was the Committee of Secret Correspondence, the body responsible for contacting foreign governments, securing supplies, and laying the groundwork for alliances that might sustain the revolution. Its work would eventually lead to vital connections with France, Spain, and other European powers. Yet today, despite the committee's central role, very little of its original record survives. Nearly all of its early documents, letters, notes, minutes, instructions, have vanished. Why? Some of the disappearance can be explained. By its nature, the committee's work was cloaked in secrecy. In November 1775, Congress itself instructed the members to maintain the secrecy of their transactions, except as directed by Congress. Sensitive letters were often burned after being read, a precaution against interception by British intelligence. Secrecy was a necessity. Loose words could mean death, or the collapse of delicate negotiations. But does this account for the scale of the loss? According to later testimony, in the years immediately after the Revolution, most of the committee's records were still intact. Some were even consulted during debates over early foreign policy. And yet, as time passed, references to these documents grow scarce. By the mid-19th century, archivists searching for them found little more than scattered fragments, letters preserved in private collections, mentions in memoirs, or copies made by clerks. The bulk of the record had simply disappeared. Who removed them, and why? Some historians suggest that the erasure may have been deliberate. The committee's dealings with foreign agents were not always honorable, nor were they always successful. Failed negotiations, false promises, or politically embarrassing compromises could have left stains that later generations preferred to forget. Were the documents destroyed to protect reputations, to ensure that the revolution's story remained heroic and unblemished? Others speculate that the missing records may have concealed more troubling details. The committee dealt not only with European courts, but also with shadowy intermediaries, merchants, adventurers, even smugglers who thrived in the murky space between commerce and espionage. Payments were made, promises exchanged, loyalties tested. What if the missing records revealed transactions too questionable to withstand scrutiny? Secret financial arrangements, or personal gain hidden beneath the cloak of patriotism? There is also the tantalizing possibility of outside interference. During the war, British agents were known to infiltrate communication lines, bribe informants, and steal correspondence. Could some of the committee's papers have been captured, spirited across the Atlantic, and locked away in British archives? If so, they might still exist, buried in some unopened box, waiting to be uncovered. And then there are the whispers of deeper intrigue. A few writers have imagined that within those missing papers lay evidence of clandestine dealings far beyond what the official narrative admits, agreements with shadow powers, coded messages, hinting at alliances never acknowledged, or knowledge that could alter our understanding of the revolution's true scope. Were the committee's members merely statesmen, or were they also players in a larger, more complex game of international espionage? The truth is difficult to grasp because so little remains. We are left with echoes, a stray letter from Franklin, instructions to envoys preserved in draft form, reports that may or may not reflect the full discussions held behind those closed doors. The silences are as telling as the words themselves. If those records were intentionally destroyed, then the decision shaped the way history remembers the revolution. If they were stolen or lost, then part of America's founding story lies hidden, perhaps forever beyond reach. And if they still exist, locked away in some forgotten archive, then they remain one of the most tantalizing secrets of the era. What bargains were struck in those secret meetings? What promises were made in the name of independence, and at what cost? Until the records themselves are found, the Committee of Secret Correspondence remains as shadowy as its name suggests, a reminder that even in the most celebrated moments of history, there are chapters we cannot fully read. From the vanished records of the Committee of Secret Correspondence, we now enter a world of shadows and ciphers, where loyalty and danger intertwined in the most intimate of forms, a diary written in code. This is the mysterious diary of Hercules Mulligan, a tailor turned spy in New York, whose clandestine activities helped shape the course of the revolution, yet whose own written account remains largely unreadable. Imagine Mulligan's workshop in the bustling streets of 18th century Manhattan. Bolts of cloth line the walls, scissors glint in candlelight, and the hum of conversation drifts through the air. To the casual observer, it is a place of ordinary commerce, a tailor serving the city's elite. But beneath the folds of fabric, secret messages passed unseen between Patriot agents. Mulligan himself, a close confidant of Alexander Hamilton and a friend of George Washington, occupied a world where knowledge was power and secrecy was survival. It is within this ordinary setting that Mulligan's coded diary was reportedly kept. Historians know of its existence through references in letters and memoirs, yet the actual manuscript, or at least significant portions of it, has never been fully deciphered. Those who glimpsed it describe a mix of letters, numbers, and symbols, arranged in patterns that defy conventional reading. The diary appears both mundane and extraordinary, an attempt to record daily events while simultaneously hiding truths that, if discovered by the British, could have meant execution. The diary's content is tantalizing to imagine. Could it detail Mulligan's intelligence-gathering efforts, the precise movements of British troops, or covert operations that never reached official records? Or perhaps it contains personal reflections, coded to protect the identities of his fellow patriots, their motives, and even the hidden networks of loyalists who might have endangered the cause. Every unreadable line is a gap in history, a silent witness to the revolution's unseen battles. Historians offer several plausible explanations for why the diary remains undeciphered. The code may have been extraordinarily complex, employing multiple substitution ciphers, symbolic shorthand, or techniques drawn from European cryptographic practices. Perhaps it relied on keys shared verbally among a select few, never written down, rendering the written diary indecipherable to anyone outside that inner circle. The very secrecy that protected the revolution may have rendered its own records inaccessible for posterity. Yet there are more speculative possibilities. Some have wondered if the diary was deliberately misleading, a form of espionage in itself, false trails, encoded messages meant to confuse enemy interceptors, or even a form of insurance, leaving observers guessing at the depth of Mulligan's knowledge. Could parts of the diary be entirely symbolic, a personal language only he could interpret? If so, then we may never know the full measure of what he recorded. The mystery deepens with questions of survival. Where is the diary now? Some suggest it was destroyed to prevent British discovery. Others believe fragments may have been smuggled out with Mulligan's personal effects. A few tantalizing rumors place portions of it in private collections, passed down through families who knew its value but not its meaning. Could it still exist, hidden in an attic or archive, waiting for a modern key to unlock its secrets? Adding to the intrigue is Mulligan's own historical profile. Unlike many spies, he operated in plain sight, mingling with Loyalist officers even as he passed intelligence to the Patriots. This duality makes the diary not just a record, but potentially a map of hidden relationships, secret loyalties, and perilous encounters. Each entry, coded or otherwise, could illuminate networks that traditional histories barely touch. What makes the diary's mystery particularly compelling is its connection to other unsolved puzzles of the Revolution. The missing maps of the Hudson, the vanishing records of the Committee of Secret Correspondence, the flow of counterfeit currency, all suggest a world where crucial information could disappear or be obscured, altering our understanding of events. Mulligan's diary sits at the heart of this network of gaps, a symbol of the invisible battles waged not with muskets, but with words and codes. As we consider the diary, one is left to wonder, what secrets does it still guard? Are there insights into strategies, betrayals, or hidden victories that have never reached history's pages? Or does it contain personal reflections, coded for privacy rather than espionage, a window into the mind of a man navigating danger and loyalty in the Revolution's most perilous city? The mystery of Hercules Mulligan's diary reminds us that even the most documented eras of history hold hidden corners. Behind every letter, ledger, and manuscript may lie stories that remain unread, voices that remain unheard, and truths that wait, patiently, to be discovered. From the clandestine writings of Hercules Mulligan, we turn now to the very streets themselves, where another mystery lies hidden beneath the revolutionary cityscape, the rumored British tunnels beneath Boston. Long after the cannons fell silent and the smoke cleared, whispers persisted of a network of underground passages, secret routes built by the occupying British, stretching beneath the cobblestone streets, connecting barracks, warehouses, and defensive positions. Imagine Boston in 1775. The city is tense, its streets crowded with redcoats, merchants, and patriots watching every movement. The British hold the waterfront, the harbor bustling with ships loaded with supplies, artillery, and troops. The city itself is a labyrinth of narrow lanes, wooden buildings, and hidden courtyards. It is in this environment, historians suggest, that the British may have sought to extend their control not only above ground, but below it. Accounts from the time hint at unusual activity. Soldiers were reportedly seen entering basements and cellars, moving crates of supplies out of sight. Some local residents recalled hearing strange noises beneath their homes, tapping, shuffling, and the sound of footsteps in areas where none should have been. Later, during excavations for newer buildings, strange voids, bricked-up passageways and tunnels were occasionally uncovered, though their purpose was never definitively explained. The strategic logic is clear. Tunnels could allow troops to move unseen, to escape surprise attacks, or to launch ambushes from hidden positions. They could store munitions or even provide secret routes for intelligence operations. In a city as tightly packed as Boston, such underground passages would be an invaluable advantage, allowing the British to maintain control in a hostile environment. Yet, evidence is scarce. No official plans or military records of these tunnels have survived. Maps of the city, both contemporary and post-war, make no mention of underground routes. Archaeological investigations have found isolated passages and bricked-up chambers, but the scale and connectivity of these structures remain uncertain. Were they simple cellars and drainage systems, later interpreted as tunnels? Or were they part of a larger, deliberate network that has mostly vanished with time? Speculation has fueled more adventurous theories. Some historians propose that the British may have constructed an elaborate system linking multiple barracks and key locations, allowing soldiers to move under the city without detection. Others suggest that the tunnels could have been used to smuggle Loyalist messages or supplies to the harbor, bypassing Patriot patrols. There are even rumors of hidden trapdoors beneath private homes, known only to a select few, providing secret access points into the labyrinth below. The passage of time has only deepened the mystery. Boston streets have been rebuilt repeatedly, modern foundations laid atop Revolutionary-era structures. Many tunnels may have been filled in or collapsed, leaving only faint traces in basements or as depressions in old sidewalks. Yet the occasional discovery, an arched brick ceiling behind a modern wall, a narrow shaft descending into darkness, ignites the imagination and raises questions about what else might lie undiscovered. Could some of these tunnels still exist, forgotten beneath the city, extending far beyond what modern researchers have encountered? Were they merely utilitarian structures, or did they play a significant role in the British strategy during the siege of Boston? And if the latter is true, what stories, what secrets, might they hold about the people who lived, fought, and spied above them? Adding to the intrigue is the testimony of local residents long after the war. Tales of mysterious footsteps, sudden drafts, and hidden chambers persisted into the 19th century, often dismissed as folklore. Yet folklore sometimes carries fragments of truth, hints of events otherwise erased by time. Could these stories preserve faint echoes of a subterranean world that has yet to be fully revealed? The rumored tunnels beneath Boston, like so many mysteries of the Revolution, blur the line between fact and speculation. They remind us that the war was not fought solely on battlefields, nor its history written only in letters and ledgers. Some conflicts left traces not above ground, but hidden in shadowed spaces beneath our feet, silent witnesses to strategy, secrecy, and survival. As we walk the streets today, it is easy to forget the layers of history beneath us. And yet, every bricked-up archway, every cellar descending into darkness, asks the same question. What remains hidden beneath the city, and what might still be waiting to reveal itself to those patient enough to search? The mystery of Boston's British tunnels is a reminder that the Revolution was not only a war of muskets and politics, but also a war of shadows, and that some of its secrets may never fully surface. From the shadows beneath Boston, we move to the correspondence of one of the Revolution's most brilliant yet elusive figures, General Nathanael Greene. Known for his strategic genius in the Southern Campaign, Greene was a master of logistics and timing, often turning adversity into advantage. Yet, despite his prominence, a striking mystery surrounds his written record. A large portion of his correspondence has vanished, leaving gaps in our understanding of his decisions, alliances, and the inner workings of the Continental Army. Picture Greene at his desk, perhaps in a modest headquarters somewhere in the Carolina backcountry. Ink-stained hands move quickly over parchment, recording orders, observations, and reports from scouts. The room is quiet except for the scratching of the quill and the occasional creak of floorboards. Outside, the sounds of a war-torn landscape, horses, distant musket fire, the murmur of soldiers, remind him that each letter could change the fate of entire brigades, or even the course of the campaign. Greene was meticulous, often corresponding with other generals, governors, and Congress itself. Yet when historians attempt to trace his words, the record is frustratingly incomplete. Letters referenced in other dispatches, cited in memoirs, or described in journals appear to have simply disappeared. Some were likely lost in the chaos of battle, others may have been destroyed during the relocation of archives, and a few could have fallen victim to theft or misplacement. But the scale of the absence is puzzling. Why have so many documents vanished while others, sometimes less significant, remain preserved? Several plausible explanations exist. Military correspondence was often moved, copied, and sometimes intentionally destroyed to prevent sensitive information from falling into enemy hands. The southern theater of war, where Greene's forces operated, was particularly volatile. Armies moved rapidly across swamps, forests, and towns under threat from British forces, Loyalist militias, and even hostile local populations. Parchments left behind could easily have been captured, destroyed, or simply lost to the elements. Yet this explanation may only partially account for the gaps. Some missing letters were not battlefield orders but private communications with Congress or fellow generals. Their disappearance raises questions. Were some letters removed deliberately, either to conceal tactical mistakes or politically sensitive decisions? Could there have been correspondence that detailed covert operations, negotiations with local allies, or strategies so delicate that later archivists chose to suppress them? Speculation grows when considering Greene's skill in maneuvering between political and military spheres. He was known to correspond with figures in France, seeking support and intelligence. Could some of his letters have been intercepted, never reaching their intended recipients, or secreted away by agents who understood their potential value? The Revolutionary War was as much a battle of information as it was of muskets and cannons, and Greene's missing correspondence may have been the silent casualties of that unseen struggle. Adding further intrigue, some historians have pointed to cryptic references in surviving letters, mentions of previous letters, plans, or reports that no longer exist. Could these have contained revelations about strategy, intelligence, or clandestine negotiations? If so, the loss of these documents obscures not only the details of Greene's campaigns, but also the broader picture of revolutionary strategy in the South. There is also the possibility of human error compounded by time. Greene's papers passed through the hands of family members, clerks, and archivists, each step introducing the potential for loss or misplacement. Fires, floods, and the slow decay of paper over decades may have consumed documents before they could be preserved. And yet, one cannot ignore the tantalizing idea that some missing letters were deliberately hidden, kept private by Greene or his contemporaries for reasons we may never fully understand. What, then, did these letters contain? Could they reveal alternative plans, alliances, or tactical maneuvers that might reshape our understanding of Greene's genius? Might they include warnings, personal reflections, or accounts of encounters with spies and Loyalist informants that are now lost to history? The disappearance of Greene's correspondence is more than an archival frustration. It is a reminder that history is shaped not only by what survives, but also by what vanishes. Each missing page leaves a silence, an empty space where answers might have been. And so the question endures. Among the letters that have vanished, what truths, insights, or secrets remain hidden? Are they lost forever to time, or might some still exist, tucked away in forgotten collections, waiting for discovery? In the life and work of Nathanael Greene, the gaps in his correspondence are as telling as the letters that survive, leaving us to wonder not only about the man himself, but about the hidden currents of the Revolutionary War that we may never fully uncover. From the vanished correspondence of Nathanael Greene, we now turn to a silence that is deeper, more permanent, and yet equally mysterious. The disappearance of Revolutionary War battlefield graves. Across the colonies, countless soldiers fell in battle, their bodies hastily buried in fields, forests, and along roadsides. Yet today, in many of the locations where the fiercest fighting occurred, the precise resting places of these men, and sometimes women, remain unknown, lost to time, development, and the shifting landscape of memory. Imagine a battlefield in the early morning light. Smoke lingers over the torn earth. Cannon fire has faded into an uneasy quiet, and the groans of the wounded echo through the trees. Soldiers dig shallow graves, often under orders to bury the dead quickly, both to prevent disease and to avoid leaving a mark for enemy forces. Piles of earth, simple wooden markers, or no markers at all distinguish these final resting places. The dead are counted, mourned in passing, and sometimes forgotten. Historical records suggest that thousands of men were buried in such ways, men who fought at places like Bunker Hill, Germantown, and Cowpens. In many cases, graves were recorded only in private diaries or officers' journals. Yet, as decades passed, much of this documentation was lost. Erosion, agriculture, and urban expansion obliterated grave sites, leaving only vague accounts of where soldiers had fallen. Entire burial fields could vanish beneath new roads, houses, and factories, leaving no trace of those interred. Some disappearances are simple and tragic. During and after the war, makeshift graves were sometimes exhumed, relocated, or destroyed by the pressures of time. Families may have attempted to reclaim remains, while local communities repurposed battlefields for farmland or development. Soil shifted, markers rotted, and with them, the precise location of countless soldiers faded into memory. Yet in other cases, the disappearance of graves carries a more unsettling intrigue. Eyewitness accounts occasionally describe soldiers buried in clandestine or hurried circumstances, victims of fear, reprisal, or secrecy. Could some graves have been deliberately concealed? Were bodies moved to prevent desecration by enemy forces, or to hide the scale of a massacre? In the fog of war, the distinction between accident and intention is often unclear. The mystery deepens when considering mass graves. Archaeological surveys have revealed unexpected burials beneath modern cities, roads, and fields, sometimes in locations not documented in any official record. Could other undiscovered burial sites exist beneath Boston, Philadelphia, or Charleston? If so, how many remain hidden, unmarked, and unremembered, carrying the names and stories of soldiers who fought in obscurity? Speculation has extended even further. Some historians and local legends suggest that certain battlefield graves were disturbed for political or financial gain. Were some remains secretly exhumed to make way for construction or agriculture? Could bones have been relocated as trophies, or even used in local industries, a grim testament to a society struggling to process the enormity of war? Though concrete evidence is sparse, the very possibility adds an additional layer of mystery. Beyond the physical disappearance, there is a symbolic silence. Many soldiers, particularly enlisted men or those from marginalized communities, were buried without formal recognition. Records were incomplete, their identities lost, and their service unrecorded. In some cases, oral histories preserve fragments of memory, but the absence of graves renders the accounts incomplete. The physical erasure of these soldiers mirrors a historical erasure, an absence that history cannot fully reconcile. And yet, there are tantalizing signs that not all is lost. Occasional discoveries, bones, uniform buttons, musket fragments, have emerged during excavations, construction, or farming, providing fleeting glimpses into the past. Each find raises new questions. Could a hidden network of burial sites remain undiscovered? Are there places where the dead have lain undisturbed for centuries, holding secrets about battles, troop movements, or the identities of the fallen? The disappearance of Revolutionary War graves reminds us that history is not only recorded in documents, letters, and maps, but also in the earth itself. Sometimes, those records vanish entirely, leaving only speculation, fragments, and the silent testimony of the landscape. As we walk across former battlefields today, it is worth asking, beneath the soil, beneath the streets and fields, who still lies forgotten? How many stories of courage, suffering, and sacrifice remain hidden, waiting for discovery, or perhaps destined to remain forever unknown? In this silence, the Revolutionary War continues to speak in whispers, through vanished letters, lost tunnels, and graves that have disappeared, reminding us that even the most tangible past can vanish without a trace. From the silent fields of vanished battlefield graves, we now turn to a different kind of absence, one that affected the very lifeblood of an army: the mysterious disappearance of supply wagons before the pivotal Battle of Saratoga. In the late summer of 1777, the Continental forces under General Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold faced an enemy poised to cut off their advance. Yet, as the Americans prepared, reports emerged of crucial wagons laden with food, ammunition, and equipment, vanishing under circumstances that remain puzzling to this day. Picture the rugged terrain of upstate New York: dense forests, winding rivers, and narrow roads carved into hillsides. Supply trains moved slowly, their wheels crunching over dirt and gravel, escorted by soldiers wary of ambushes. Each wagon represented not only sustenance, but survival: flour for the troops, muskets for skirmishes, blankets for cold nights. The logistics of war depended on these fragile threads, yet some of them simply failed to reach their destinations. Contemporary accounts indicate that several wagons went missing over a period of days, despite careful planning and military escorts. Some were never reported, while others arrived late, empty, or stripped of supplies. Historians have suggested practical explanations. Difficult terrain, river crossings, and the inherent chaos of war could have delayed or destroyed wagons. Banditry and opportunistic theft along the route were also known risks. Yet certain aspects remain inexplicable. Some wagons disappeared in areas thought to be secure, under the watch of patrols. Others vanished without a trace, leaving no witnesses, tracks, or evidence of attack. How could so many supplies simply vanish when standard military protocol called for guards, documentation, and coordinated movement? The scale and pattern of these losses suggest more than random misfortune. Speculative theories abound. Some historians have proposed Loyalist sympathizers operating behind American lines, quietly diverting wagons to aid British forces. Others suggest the possibility of intentional misdirection, either to confuse the enemy or as a covert method of redistributing supplies among Allied troops. Could there have been internal mismanagement or even sabotage by those within the American ranks, driven by fear, personal gain, or misjudgment? Adding to the intrigue is the timing. The loss of these supplies came just weeks before the first major engagements near Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights, critical moments that would define the Saratoga campaign. Did these disappearances influence strategic decisions, forcing commanders to alter positions, delay attacks, or improvise supply lines? If so, the missing wagons may have shaped the course of one of the Revolution's most consequential battles. Eyewitness accounts provide fragments, but rarely complete explanations. Letters from soldiers mention shortages and confusion, but rarely pinpoint causes. Officers' reports note missing wagons without elaboration, suggesting that even those in command were uncertain of the circumstances. This uncertainty deepens the sense of mystery. In a well-documented campaign like Saratoga, why does such a critical logistical anomaly remain largely unexplained? Some have even suggested that portions of the missing supply train might have been deliberately destroyed to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Could wagons have been hidden in the dense forests or sunk in rivers, intended as a temporary measure, only to be forgotten in the chaos that followed? If so, are remnants of these wagons still buried in the wilderness, waiting to be uncovered by modern exploration? The disappearance of supply wagons before Saratoga is emblematic of the Revolution's uncertainties. Even in a campaign meticulously recorded where strategies, troop movements, and battlefield positions were documented, some elements remain elusive. Each missing wagon represents not only lost material, but a gap in the historical record, a question mark over the narrative of the campaign. As we reflect on these vanished wagons, one cannot help but wonder, were they merely casualties of terrain, chance, and the fog of war? Or did they fall victim to deliberate acts by enemy forces or hidden actors within the Army itself? Could uncovering even a fragment of this story change our understanding of the Saratoga campaign and the forces that shaped its outcome? In the end, the lost supply wagons serve as a reminder that even well-documented events harbor shadows. Amid forests and rivers, along the paths soldiers once traveled, pieces of history may remain concealed, their secrets waiting for discovery, or perhaps destined to remain forever unknown. From the vanished supply wagons of Saratoga, our exploration now turns to a group of operatives whose contributions were rarely recorded, yet whose impact may have been profound. Women spies of the American Revolution. Beyond the famed Agent 355 of the Culper Ring, countless women moved through the social and political networks of the colonies, their work largely undocumented, their identities often obscured by secrecy, propriety, or the passing of time. Picture a drawing room in 1777 New York or Philadelphia. Candles flicker against walls adorned with portraits of colonial elites. Servants move quietly, attending to domestic duties, while the women of the household carry on conversations that may seem mundane but, in fact, conceal a far more urgent purpose. Letters slip unnoticed between acquaintances, overheard remarks are committed to memory, and coded messages are tucked into the folds of clothing or sewn into quilts. Every gesture, every word, might serve as a thread in a vast web of intelligence. Historical records reveal a handful of women whose contributions are documented, but tantalizing gaps hint at a much larger, unrecorded network. Spies like Agent 355 worked within the male-dominated structures of espionage, yet many others operated in plain sight. Merchants' wives, tavern keepers, laundresses, and neighbors who could move freely in spaces where men were scrutinized. Their ability to gather information, deliver messages, or observe troop movements without attracting suspicion made them invaluable. Yet for each documented case, there are dozens, perhaps hundreds, whose names have been lost. Diaries, letters, and official reports rarely acknowledge their participation, either to protect their identities or because contemporary chroniclers deemed such work inappropriate for women to record. Could these gaps in the historical record hide stories of critical intelligence, thwarted plots, or pivotal interventions that shaped the outcome of battles and campaigns? Speculation emerges from both historical hints and the silence surrounding them. Some suggest that women served as couriers between Patriot cells, conveying messages that could alter the timing of troop movements or the success of covert operations. Others may have manipulated social gatherings, subtly extracting information from officers and loyalists alike, information that was then passed on to military planners. Their influence, though invisible, may have been decisive. The geographic scope of this unrecorded espionage is vast. In urban centers like New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, women moved through households, markets, and churches, observing British patrols or listening to whispers of Loyalist activity. In rural areas, they carried messages between farms and encampments, often at great personal risk. Every unnoticed act, an overheard conversation, a hidden note, a coded letter tucked into a sewing project, could become part of a broader intelligence network that remained undocumented in official reports. Even where hints exist, the full extent remains mysterious. Some women were undoubtedly trained, or at least advised, in basic cryptography, invisible ink, or the use of ciphers. Others acted instinctively, using their social position and mobility to gather intelligence without formal instruction. Were there coordinated cells of women, operating independently or in collaboration with male counterparts? Or were their efforts largely decentralized, carried out through improvisation and necessity? The absence of documentation leaves these questions unanswered. Adding to the intrigue is the danger they faced. Discovery could mean imprisonment, public shame, or execution. The British recognized the risk posed by informants, and while men often faced capture on battlefields, women could be betrayed by a neighbor's suspicion or a servant's indiscretion. The very secrecy that protected these women also ensured that their stories might vanish without a trace. The mystery extends beyond individual actions to systemic influence. Could these unrecorded agents have affected the timing of troop movements, the outcomes of skirmishes, or even the broader strategies of both the Continental and British forces? In the absence of surviving documents, we can only infer the possible impact from gaps in recorded events and the remarkable intelligence successes of the Patriot cause. As we reflect on the unseen role of women in the Revolution, one is struck by the quiet courage required to operate in shadows. Their work was dangerous, unheralded, and often erased from the historical record. Yet it may have been essential, weaving a network of observation, communication, and subtle influence that shaped the course of the war. What secrets remain hidden in these unrecorded lives? How many crucial decisions were informed by the whispers, letters, and observations of women whose names we will never know? The silence of history in this regard is as compelling as the documented exploits of their male counterparts, inviting us to consider the invisible architecture of intelligence and the hidden actors who shaped the revolution in ways we may never fully uncover. In contemplating the unrecorded network of women spies beyond Agent 355, we are reminded that history is never fully told. For every name written in ink, there are countless others, lost, hidden, and silent, whose actions echo faintly across time, leaving mysteries that continue to invite our curiosity and wonder. From the unrecorded work of women spies, we turn now to a mystery of loss on a much larger scale, the burning of the Philadelphia archives in 1781. In the heart of the city, where the new nation's administrative and historical records were kept, fire swept through corridors of government and history, leaving behind smoke, charred timbers, and an absence whose magnitude is difficult to comprehend. The loss was not merely physical. It erased an entire layer of the revolutionary record, silencing voices and documents that might have revealed untold aspects of the struggle for independence. Imagine the bustling streets of Philadelphia in the summer of 1781. Merchants call out from shop fronts, carriages clatter over cobblestones, and city officials move through chambers filled with ledgers, letters, and reports that chart the nascent United States fight for survival. Within the archives, rooms are stacked with carefully cataloged papers, correspondence between generals, reports from committees, petitions, and treaties. These were the lifeblood of administration and intelligence, the fragile threads connecting Congress to the front lines, to state governments, and to the networks of allies abroad. And then, suddenly, flames. The fire, whether accidental or deliberate, consumed these records with terrifying efficiency. Eyewitnesses describe walls of fire reflecting in glass windows, the smell of smoke and ink permeating the streets, and the hurried efforts of clerks attempting to rescue what they could. Yet even with desperate attempts, much of the material vanished, leaving gaps that historians have struggled to reconstruct for over 2 centuries. The mainstream explanation is simple. A fire broke out, a tragedy of accident, fueled by candles, lanterns, and the wooden structures of 18th century Philadelphia. Fires were common, and archives, despite their importance, were highly vulnerable. Yet certain details defy simple explanation. Some documents seem to disappear without record of their destruction. Others were reported missing well before flames reached them. Could all of this be coincidence, or might there have been deliberate intervention? Speculation has grown over the years. Some theorists suggest that sensitive correspondence, letters detailing troop movements, intelligence networks, or secret negotiations, may have been intentionally destroyed to prevent British discovery. Others propose that political adversaries, aware of potentially compromising documents, may have sought to erase evidence, quietly removing papers before or during the conflagration. The lines between accident, necessity, and intrigue are blurred, leaving us to wonder what the fire truly consumed. The scale of the loss is staggering. Reports indicate that entire committees' records vanished, leaving only fragments referenced elsewhere. Official correspondence with generals, petitions from local authorities, and records of espionage operations, what precisely existed within those rooms, is impossible to know now. For historians, the burning represents not just a physical absence, but a profound historical silence. How many letters revealing hidden strategies, covert alliances, or clandestine support from foreign powers were lost in the flames? Could the fire have permanently erased the documentation of events that, if preserved, might have rewritten aspects of revolutionary history? Adding to the mystery is the timing. 1781 was a critical year. The final campaigns of the war were unfolding, foreign alliances were shifting, and intelligence networks were at their most active. The archives housed details of operations that could have affected the outcome of battles, supply lines, and even negotiations with European allies. Could the loss of these documents have indirectly shaped military and political decisions by removing vital context or guidance from the records? Even surviving accounts of the fire are fragmentary, relying on second-hand reports, memoirs, and scattered references in letters. These glimpses tantalize without satisfying, hinting at documents that recorded financial arrangements, intelligence dispatches, or lists of loyalists and sympathizers, materials whose existence is now known only through passing mentions. What else was contained in those rooms that might have revealed the inner workings of the revolution in ways never imagined? Some researchers have explored the possibility that portions of the archives were salvaged and quietly stored elsewhere. Could fragments have survived, hidden in private collections, or misfiled in municipal buildings, waiting to be rediscovered? Or were the majority truly lost, erased by smoke, fire, and human oversight? The uncertainty is a reminder that history is never entirely under our control. Events, documents, and decisions can vanish, leaving only echoes of what once was. The burning of the Philadelphia archives stands as a stark testament to the fragility of memory and record. It is a mystery not of what occurred in the Revolution, but of what we can no longer know. Each missing document, each erased correspondence, leaves a gap that invites speculation, imagination, and careful reflection. And so, one is compelled to ask, amid the ashes of those archives, what secrets were consumed? What truths strategies, and human stories vanished in the flames? And how might our understanding of the Revolution be different had they survived? The silence of Philadelphia in 1781 continues to echo across centuries, a lingering reminder that history, no matter how diligently recorded, can be lost in a moment, and some mysteries may remain beyond our grasp forever. From the flames that consumed Philadelphia's archives, we turn now to a more intimate and troubling mystery, one that struck the Continental Army itself, the strange illness that afflicted troops before the Battle of Princeton. In the bitter winter of 1776 to 1777, just weeks after the dramatic crossing of the Delaware, soldiers reported sudden, debilitating symptoms that disrupted camps, slowed movements, and confounded medical officers. The timing of this mysterious malady, just as General George Washington prepared a bold offensive, has left historians questioning its nature, its origin, and its possible impact on one of the Revolution's pivotal engagements. Picture the campgrounds outside Trenton, New Jersey. Snow blankets the frozen fields, smoke curls from small fires, and soldiers huddle in makeshift shelters trying to warm themselves against the winter chill. The air is tense, filled with anticipation of the coming offensive, yet a shadow of unease grows as men begin to fall ill. Some complain of fever and chills, others of stomach pains and weakness, while a few succumb so quickly that they are carried from tents to rough graves without ceremony. The phenomenon spreads unpredictably, striking some companies severely while leaving others relatively untouched. Contemporary accounts describe a range of symptoms: nausea, vomiting, fatigue, and a persistent low-grade fever. The cause was unknown to the Army's physicians, who could offer only rudimentary treatment: warm broths, rest, and prayers. Modern historians and medical researchers have proposed explanations ranging from foodborne pathogens, contaminated water, or exposure to harsh winter conditions, to influenza or other viral infections circulating in the region. Yet the abrupt onset, uneven distribution, and timing of the outbreak suggest that there may have been additional, less understood factors at play. One striking detail is the alignment of this outbreak with critical troop movements. Soldiers weakened by the illness were less able to march, carry equipment, or maintain defensive positions. Could the malady have influenced Washington's decisions, perhaps compelling him to act swiftly in order to strike before the sickness spread further? Or did it inadvertently protect the Army, delaying movement until conditions improved, allowing for a more strategic attack on Princeton? The interaction between disease and military planning is a reminder that the course of history is often shaped by forces beyond strategy and politics. Speculation deepens when considering the environment of the encampments. Soldiers subsisted on salted meat, hardtack, and limited fresh provisions, often exposed to freezing temperatures and damp conditions. Latrines were rudimentary, water sources easily contaminated, and winter storms frequently swept through the region. Could a combination of these factors have created the perfect storm for illness? Or might there have been an element of sabotage, intentional or inadvertent, such as contaminated supplies or poor storage of provisions, that contributed to the outbreak? Eyewitness reports hint at the human dimension of the suffering. Letters from officers and diaries describe men too weak to rise from their bunks, comrades forced to drag fellow soldiers through snow and mud, and the quiet desperation of those who feared they might not survive to see the next sunrise. Yet precise records are scarce, leaving questions unanswered. How many were affected? How many recovered fully? And how many were permanently debilitated? The malady's origin remains equally enigmatic. While modern science can speculate about pathogens or environmental causes, there is no surviving documentation that pinpoints a specific disease or explains its uneven spread. Some suggest that local conditions, Perhaps contaminated wells or spoiled provisions played a role. Others propose that exposure to cold and stress weakened immune systems, making soldiers more susceptible to naturally circulating infections. Still, the exact cause remains a matter of conjecture, leaving a gap in the historical record. The broader implications are equally mysterious. Did this illness shape Washington's timing, influencing the famous night march to Princeton? Could it have altered the composition of forces, giving certain units an advantage or disadvantage in the engagement? And beyond the tactical, did the outbreak affect morale, forging bonds of endurance and resilience, or sowing fear and uncertainty among the troops? The answers remain elusive, as if the sickness itself has slipped quietly into history, leaving only faint traces in letters and memoirs. Ultimately, the strange illness before Princeton reminds us that war is influenced not only by human planning and battlefield tactics, but also by unseen forces, disease, environment, and circumstance. Each unanswered question invites reflection. Could the fate of soldiers and battles alike hinge on phenomena we may never fully understand? As we consider these unknown afflictions, one is left to wonder, what was the true nature of this mysterious malady, and how might its presence have shifted the course of events? Amid snow, tents, and the quiet suffering of men, history holds its secrets close, waiting for those who dare to piece together the silent story of the Revolution. From the unseen afflictions that plagued troops before Princeton, we now turn to a mystery of deliberate destruction, the unsolved sabotage of American gunpowder mills in 1777. These mills, scattered across the colonies, were the lifeblood of the Continental Army, supplying the essential powder that allowed muskets to fire, cannons to roar, and battles to be fought. Yet in the midst of war, several key mills experienced sudden, unexplained incidents. Fires, explosions, and equipment failures that crippled production at precisely the moment it was most needed. Picture a mill on the banks of a quiet river in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Water wheels turn lazily in the early morning mist, churning gears that grind saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur into the delicate, volatile mixture that becomes gunpowder. Workers move cautiously among barrels and vats, aware that a single spark could bring ruin. The air carries a pungent odor, and the constant rhythm of grinding is almost hypnotic, a steady pulse of industry vital to the fight for independence. And then, abruptly, disaster. Reports describe sudden fires that consumed wooden structures, explosions that shattered windows, and mysterious equipment malfunctions that halted production for days or weeks. The timing of these events was critical. The Continental Army faced growing pressure from British forces, and shortages of powder could, and did, directly impact operational capacity. Yet investigations at the time yielded few concrete answers, and even today, the causes of these incidents remain murky. Some contemporary accounts attribute the damage to accident. Gunpowder production was inherently dangerous, and mills were susceptible to fire, damp conditions, and human error. A careless spark, a poorly sealed barrel, or the wrong mixture could trigger disaster. This explanation is plausible, particularly given the primitive safety standards of the era. But patterns in the incidents raise questions. Multiple mills affected within a short time frame and in locations far from one another suggest more than mere coincidence. Could someone have moved deliberately to sabotage the production of powder critical to the Patriot cause? Speculation over who or what was responsible is compelling. Loyalist sympathizers operating behind American lines may have had the motive and means to disrupt production. Could they have infiltrated mills, tampered with machinery, or contaminated raw materials, all while leaving little trace? Some reports hint at unknown agents moving under the cover of night, taking advantage of the limited security at remote mills. Others propose that industrial accidents were amplified by fear and rumor, giving rise to tales of deliberate sabotage that were never verified. The human cost adds urgency to the mystery. Explosions and fires were deadly. Workers and soldiers often lost limbs, lives, and livelihoods. Beyond the immediate physical danger, each interruption weakened the Army's ability to fight effectively, delaying campaigns and threatening the fragile supply chain. Did these disruptions change the timing of battles, influence troop movements, or alter strategic decisions? Could the loss of a single shipment of powder have tipped the balance in a skirmish or campaign? The ripple effects are difficult to measure, but potentially significant. Further intrigue emerges when considering contemporary correspondence. Letters from military officers reference lost shipments, delayed orders, and the mysterious destruction of stockpiles. Yet the details are vague, and few investigations reached conclusive findings. Were records destroyed in fires? Were perpetrators never caught, or perhaps intentionally overlooked? The combination of secrecy, chaos, and danger leaves the true story largely hidden. Even modern historians cannot fully account for the events. Archaeological surveys of old mill sites reveal evidence of fire and blast damage, but cannot always distinguish between accident and sabotage. Surviving ledgers and reports provide glimpses, but rarely definitive proof. And so, like so many revolutionary mysteries, the truth exists somewhere between documentation and speculation, leaving tantalizing gaps for researchers and storytellers alike. The unsolved sabotage of the gunpowder mills serves as a reminder that war is fought not only on battlefields but in workshops, mills, and hidden corners where human agency, both loyal and hostile, can shape outcomes in subtle yet profound ways. Each unexplained fire, each damaged machine, is a story lost to time, a silent witness to an event whose full meaning may never be known. As we reflect on these incidents, one is compelled to wonder, were they the result of accident, design, or a combination of both? Could entire campaigns have shifted in ways we cannot trace because of the sudden, unexplained failures of these mills? And beneath the smoke and charred remains of 1777, do remnants of evidence still lie buried, waiting to reveal secrets that have eluded historians for centuries? In this quiet uncertainty, the unsolved sabotage of American gunpowder mills reminds us that even in the most tangible aspects of war, materials, machinery, and supply, mysteries endure, leaving gaps that invite curiosity, reflection, and perhaps the faint hope that some truths might yet emerge. From the unsolved sabotage of gunpowder mills, we turn now to another enigma, this time striking at the very heart of the Continental Army's cohesion and morale, the vanishing payrolls of 1779. Soldiers depended on these payments, promised in bills of exchange, coins or notes, for food, clothing, and survival. Yet as the war pressed on, reports emerged of payrolls that disappeared without trace, leaving units unpaid, officers baffled, and historians puzzled. Picture a winter encampment along the banks of a frozen river or in a small town converted into a military depot. Soldiers huddle around smoky fires, scraping frost from their uniforms, counting rations, and awaiting the arrival of their pay. Paymasters, tasked with delivering sums often worth thousands of dollars in contemporary currency, move cautiously through the camps, guarding their ledgers and chests filled with bills and coins. The air is thick with anticipation, but a quiet tension lingers. When payments fail to arrive, anxiety quickly turns to suspicion and fear. Contemporary records reveal that entire shipments of payroll funds were reported missing or delayed, sometimes for weeks. Official reports note lost chests, stolen ledgers, or funds never recorded as received. Some accounts suggest that entire units went without pay, while others received partial sums, creating confusion and frustration that threatened discipline. Soldiers relied on these payrolls not merely for comfort but for survival. Without them, loyalty could waver, desertion could rise, and the armies to fight was jeopardized. Mainstream explanations cite the chaos of wartime logistics. Roads were poor, transport wagons slow and vulnerable, and payrolls moved through hostile territory. Theft by bandits, errors by clerks, or misrouting of funds could easily account for some losses. Yet the pattern of disappearance is curious. Shipments vanished even under guard, with no trace of robbery, misdelivery, or documentation errors. How could so many payrolls vanish with such regularity, yet leave no definitive record of theft? Speculative theories abound. Some suggest Loyalist interference, with agents infiltrating supply lines and redirecting funds to British sympathizers. Others propose internal complicity. Were some payrolls deliberately misappropriated by officers or intermediaries seeking personal gain, only to vanish from the official record? A third possibility hints at deliberate destruction of ledgers or records, perhaps to cover mistakes, obscure corruption, or conceal intelligence operations embedded within financial transactions. The human impact was immediate and profound. Letters from soldiers describe growing frustration, the anxiety of unpaid bills, and the necessity of borrowing or bartering for food. Officers struggled to maintain morale, enforce discipline, and ensure readiness for campaigns while grappling with the uncertainty of missing payrolls. Could these disruptions have influenced strategic decisions, delayed marches, or weakened certain detachments at critical moments? The ripple effects are difficult to measure, yet undeniably significant. The vanishing payrolls also highlight the fragility of record-keeping in the Revolution. Even when meticulous ledgers were maintained, the combination of paper vulnerability, environmental hazards, and the pressures of war meant that documentation could easily disappear. Fires, floods, or simple human error might erase a transaction forever, leaving historians with tantalizing gaps. In many cases, only fragments of correspondence survive, referencing lost payments without detailing causes or outcomes. Adding to the intrigue is the timing of these disappearances. 1779 was a year of continued campaigns, shifting alliances and strategic maneuvers across the colonies. Payrolls were not merely economic tools. They were instruments of loyalty, a means to secure commitment from soldiers and ensure operational readiness. Were these funds targeted deliberately to weaken the Continental Army? Or did the losses occur randomly, exacerbated by circumstance and chance? The answer remains elusive. Some historians speculate that remnants of these funds, or at least records of their intended delivery, might still lie hidden in obscure archives, misfiled collections, or private papers yet to be discovered. Others propose that the disappearance will forever remain an unsolvable puzzle, a silent testament to the fragility of material and documentation during times of upheaval. The vanishing payrolls of 1779 remind us that even in matters as tangible as money, history can retain its mysteries. Each lost chest, each unrecorded ledger, represents a story untold, a gap where human ambition, error, and circumstance intersect. And so we are left with a lingering question: who or what was responsible for these disappearances, and how might the course of campaigns, loyalties, and individual lives have shifted in the shadows of missing funds? The payrolls may be gone, but their mystery endures, inviting reflection and wonder over what secrets still lie hidden in the archives of the American Revolution. From the vanished payrolls of 1779, we move to a mystery that struck at the very logistics of war: the strange disappearance of supply wagons in the weeks leading up to the Battle of Saratoga. As the Continental Army prepared to confront British forces in upstate New York, the movement of supplies was crucial. Food, ammunition, tents, and medical provisions needed to reach the front lines on time. Yet reports emerged of wagons that never arrived, drivers who vanished, and convoys that seemingly dissolved into the wilderness. The disruption was more than inconvenient. It threatened to alter the course of one of the Revolution's most pivotal campaigns. Imagine the dense forests and winding roads of the Hudson Valley in late summer 1777. Horses strain under the weight of wooden wagons loaded with barrels of flour, sacks of gunpowder, and crates of musket balls. Soldiers and teamsters trudge along muddy paths, their boots sinking in rain-soaked earth, the air heavy with the scent of damp wood and livestock. The convoy moves cautiously, alert for ambushes, natural obstacles, or any unforeseen impediments. Yet, despite careful planning, some wagons fail to reach their destinations, leaving gaps in supply lines and uncertainty among commanding officers. Official correspondence documents the frustration. Reports of missing wagons, delayed provisions, and men sent to track down lost convoys. Some suggest that rough terrain and inclement weather caused accidents. Wagons stuck in mud, river crossings washed out, wheels shattered. Yet the scale and frequency of these disappearances are perplexing. Entire convoys vanish without trace, and in some instances, drivers were found days later, disoriented or unable to explain what had occurred. Could mere accident account for such widespread disruption, or does something more deliberate lie beneath the surface? Speculation has persisted for centuries. Loyalist sympathizers and British agents may have been operating behind American lines, sabotaging convoys to weaken the Continental Army at a critical moment. Were wagons ambushed under cover of night, provisions diverted, or men threatened into silence? Some theories even suggest natural causes amplified by human intervention. Sudden storms, landslides, or river flooding that conveniently coincided with enemy activity. The absence of concrete records leaves the events open to interpretation. Eyewitness accounts hint at both human and environmental factors. Drivers and soldiers describe narrow forest paths, slippery slopes, and dense undergrowth that could easily conceal an ambush or trap a wagon. Yet the randomness of which convoys disappeared and which arrived safely suggests an element of unpredictability, or perhaps intention, beyond simple misfortune. Was this merely the chaos of war in rugged terrain, or were invisible hands guiding the fate of supplies? The implications of these losses were serious. Shortages of food and ammunition threatened to weaken the Army's readiness, compromise morale, and force commanders to make difficult decisions. Did these disruptions influence the timing of troop movements, the deployment of forces, or the decisions that ultimately led to the decisive engagements near Saratoga? Could unseen factors have nudged the outcome of history, hidden in the quiet disappearance of wagons along muddy roads and forested hillsides? Historians have long debated the possibilities. Contemporary reports offer fragments but rarely full explanations, leaving gaps that invite both cautious conjecture and imaginative reconstruction. Some researchers suggest that stolen supplies may have been quietly recovered, hidden, or redistributed, leaving little trace in the official record. Others argue that the mystery may never be solved, a casualty of the imperfect documentation and the passage of time. The strange disappearance of supply wagons highlights the vulnerability of wartime logistics in the 18th century. Roads were primitive, security was minimal, and environmental hazards were omnipresent. Yet the frequency and timing of the losses, coinciding with a critical campaign, suggests there may have been more at play than accident alone. The line between chance, misfortune, and intentional interference blurs, leaving questions that continue to intrigue historians and enthusiasts alike. As we consider these vanished convoys, one is compelled to wonder, who or what was truly responsible for their disappearance? Were these losses the result of natural obstacles, human error, enemy action, or a combination of all three? And how might the course of the Saratoga campaign and the larger Revolutionary War have shifted if these wagons had arrived as planned. In the shadowed forests and winding roads of 1777, the answer remains elusive, a quiet mystery that invites reflection on the fragile threads that sustain armies and the unseen forces that can alter the course of history. From the vanished supply wagons of Saratoga, we turn now to a darker and more enigmatic chapter, the disappearance of key witnesses in the Arnold-André conspiracy. In 1780, as the Revolutionary War raged, a secret plot threatened to alter the course of the struggle for independence. British Major John André, acting as a liaison with Benedict Arnold, was caught in a web of espionage, betrayal, and clandestine movement. Yet, amid the exposure of this conspiracy, several crucial figures who might have shed light on its full scope simply vanished from the historical record, leaving gaps that have fueled speculation for centuries. Picture the bustling streets of New York City, then under British occupation. Lanterns flicker against stone walls, the quiet murmur of taverns, masks, whispered conversations, and horse-drawn carriages navigate narrow, uneven roads. Somewhere in the city, papers are exchanged, messages hidden, and allegiances tested. It was here that André moved with caution, carrying correspondence and maps that could change the balance of power. Behind the scenes, Arnold coordinated, sending signals and instructions that only a handful could decipher. And yet, as events unfolded, some witnesses, men and women who might have confirmed, denied, or elaborated on key details, disappeared without explanation. Historical records confirm the known fates of André and Arnold, but the absence of certain testimonies has long puzzled historians. Court documents reference potential witnesses whose names vanish from subsequent proceedings. Letters hint at informants who were never called, or who suddenly ceased correspondence. Could these absences be attributed to fear, flight, or untimely death? Or is there evidence of deliberate silencing, an attempt to bury knowledge of the conspiracy before it could destabilize military or political calculations? Mainstream explanations suggest that the chaotic circumstances of war, personal caution, or simple miscommunication accounted for some of these gaps. Witnesses might have fled British-controlled areas, perished during travel, or been deliberately overlooked to streamline the trial of André. Yet the pattern of missing individuals raises deeper questions. Were some deliberately hidden, bribed, or threatened into silence? Could sympathetic allies, whether patriot or loyalist, have intervened to shield certain figures from scrutiny, preserving secrets that even today remain tantalizingly out of reach? Consider the human element. Those who vanished were not mere names on a list. They were people with knowledge, observations, and potential influence over the outcome of events. Their absence left authorities relying on incomplete testimonies, shaping judgments and historical accounts in ways that may never be fully understood. What information did they carry that could have altered perceptions of Arnold's betrayal or André's capture? Did their silence allow some aspects of the conspiracy to remain hidden, or was it merely a byproduct of fear and circumstance? Speculative theories invite further intrigue. Some suggest that certain witnesses were quietly spirited out of reach, possibly to prevent them from revealing connections between American officers and British intelligence. Others propose that the missing individuals may have been co-opted by the enemy, coerced into keeping silent for their own survival. The possibility of accidental disappearance, death during travel, illness, or misplacement in the tumult of war, cannot be dismissed. Yet, even centuries later, the absence of corroborating evidence preserves an unsettling ambiguity. The mystery deepens when examining correspondence and secondary reports. Letters reference conversations, sightings, and meetings, but the trail abruptly ends in many cases. Scholars have noted these abrupt gaps, pointing to a conspicuous silence that coincides with critical moments in the unfolding of the conspiracy. Were these lapses intentional, a careful effort to control what the public or military leadership could know? Or were they the natural outcome of a war environment in which movement, communication, and survival were fraught with uncertainty? The disappearance of key witnesses in the Arnold-André affair underscores the fragile nature of historical memory. Each missing voice represents a potential insight into one of the Revolution's most infamous betrayals. Without them, narratives are constructed from partial evidence, relying on inference, conjecture, and educated guesswork. The gaps themselves become a part of the story, a silent testament to the limitations and vulnerabilities of human record-keeping in times of conflict. As we reflect on these vanished witnesses, one is compelled to ask, who were they, and what truths did they carry that might have reshaped our understanding of the conspiracy? Were they lost to chance, or deliberately removed from the historical stage? And in the quiet absence of their testimony, what secrets remain locked within letters, ledgers, and the shadows of New York's streets? In the intrigue surrounding Arnold and André, history leaves us with an enduring enigma, inviting us to consider the hidden dimensions of loyalty, betrayal, and the unknown actors whose stories have yet to emerge. From the vanished witnesses of the Arnold-André conspiracy, we move back to the early days of open conflict, to a gathering shrouded in secrecy and legend, the secret night council before the Battle of Bunker Hill. In the summer of 1775, as tension escalated between the colonies and British forces in Boston, a group of Patriot leaders convened under the cover of darkness to discuss strategy, positioning, and the possibility of engagement that could alter the course of the siege. Yet the details of this meeting, its participants, and even its exact location remain enigmatic, leaving historians to piece together fragments from letters, diaries, and second-hand accounts. Picture the Charlestown Peninsula at night. The harbor reflects moonlight on calm water, while the distant drums of the British garrison seem faint, almost spectral. A narrow path winds up the hills that overlook Boston, leading to a modest, hidden dwelling or perhaps a secluded grove of trees. Within this dimly lit space, candles flicker against the walls, casting shifting shadows on the faces of men whose names would come to symbolize early American resistance. Maps are unfurled, quills poised over parchment, and hushed voices debate supply lines, troop movements, and the risks of open confrontation. The air is thick with the scent of smoke, wax, and tension, as decisions made here could shape the opening acts of a broader rebellion. Contemporary references to the council are tantalizing but sparse. Letters from officers and observers allude to urgent meetings conducted at night, described vaguely as clandestine or confidential. Some accounts suggest that only a handful of trusted commanders were present, while others imply a slightly broader circle, including local militia leaders and advisors whose names have largely disappeared from historical record. This ambiguity has fueled speculation. Was this council merely a practical session to coordinate defenses, or was it a deliberate, secretive gathering with political and military implications that extended beyond what we can trace? Mainstream historians propose practical explanations. Under the constant watch of British patrols, such meetings were conducted at night out of necessity to avoid detection and prevent leaks. The secrecy may have been purely strategic, a measure to safeguard information and protect the men involved from capture or reprisal. Yet the limited documentation, coupled with inconsistencies in the surviving records, leaves room for more intriguing possibilities. Could discussions at this council have included not only defensive tactics, but also clandestine negotiations, espionage, or plans that were deliberately obscured to protect sensitive alliances? Speculative theories deepen the mystery. Some suggest that key figures may have used the cover of night to recruit local informants, establish hidden communication lines, or even deliberate misinformation to mislead British observers. Others propose that certain participants might have disappeared from records intentionally, either to protect their identities or because their actions remained too controversial to document fully. The possibility that elements of the Council's discussions were deliberately erased or never recorded adds an unsettling dimension to our understanding of early revolutionary strategy. Consider the psychological landscape of those involved. The Council convened at a time when the future of the colonies was uncertain, and every decision carried weighty consequences. Fear, determination, and the weight of potential catastrophe would have influenced conversation, encouraging secrecy and caution. The hills above Boston were a vantage point not only for planning, but also for observation. With the knowledge that enemy scouts or Loyalist informants could be nearby, listening, watching, and waiting for any slip of information. In such circumstances, silence can be as telling as speech, and absence can be as meaningful as presence. Evidence is further complicated by time. Diaries note meetings, but with scant detail. Letters mention attendees, yet sometimes contradict one another. Maps and annotations hint at planning, yet offer no definitive confirmation of outcomes or decisions. The lack of primary documentation challenges historians. Without direct transcripts or verified minutes, we are left to reconstruct events from inference, imagination, and cross-referencing fragmentary sources. The Secret Night Council highlights the tenuous line between strategy and mystery in wartime. It underscores how decisions made in darkness, both literal and figurative, can shape the course of events in ways that are only partially recoverable. Even the identity of some participants, their exact words, and the strategies debated remain partially obscured, reminding us that history often preserves outcomes while leaving the process elusive. As we reflect on this clandestine meeting, one is compelled to ask, what exactly was discussed under those flickering candles? Who was present, and who remains hidden in the shadows of history? Were there plans, alliances, or warnings that were deliberately concealed from posterity? And in the quiet darkness of that night, on the hills overlooking Boston, what secrets were whispered that never reached the broader record, leaving only the faintest trace of intrigue for us to ponder today? In the unfolding mystery of the American Revolution, the Secret Night Council before Bunker Hill endures as a silent witness to the uncertainty, strategy, and hidden maneuvering that shaped the earliest stages of the fight for independence, inviting us to consider the unseen forces at work in moments of history that teeter between fact and legend. From the shadowed deliberations of the Secret Night Council before Bunker Hill, we move deeper into the labyrinth of revolutionary intrigue, to the mysterious fate of Captain James Morgan's hidden dispatches. Morgan, a trusted officer in the Continental Army, played a critical role in the flow of intelligence during a time when communication could mean the difference between victory and disaster. Yet some of the dispatches he carried, or arranged to carry, vanished entirely, leaving gaps in the historical record and questions that remain unresolved to this day. Imagine the quiet corridors of a colonial homestead in New York, or the wooded paths leading through the Hudson Valley. Morgan, a man of precise habits and keen intelligence, would slip envelopes, maps, and coded messages into his coat, tucking them carefully away from prying eyes. Horses pawed at muddy roads as he moved under cover of darkness, aware that British patrols, Loyalist sympathizers, and even opportunistic bandits could intercept his mission. The air was thick with damp mist, the faint smell of smoke and pine mingling as he navigated the terrain, his every step measured, deliberate. Yet despite careful planning and vigilance, some dispatches never reached their intended recipients, disappearing into the uncertain folds of war. Records indicate that Morgan's assignments were both sensitive and urgent. He carried intelligence on troop movements, supply lines, and strategic intentions, information that could sway campaigns and save countless lives. Contemporary correspondence references his efforts and occasionally notes delayed or missing messages, but in many cases, the trail ends abruptly. Some dispatches are mentioned in letters only to vanish from official archives, leaving historians to reconstruct their possible contents and intended impact from fragmentary clues. Mainstream explanations point to the hazards of wartime communication. Roads were perilous, wagons overturned, and couriers vulnerable to theft or accident. Some dispatches could have been lost due to environmental hazards, a river crossing swept away in floodwaters, a horse collapsing under heavy burden, or a carriage swallowed by muddy paths. Yet the pattern of disappearance often seems too deliberate to be purely accidental. Entire packets of intelligence disappeared at critical junctures, never recovered and with no sign of interception, raising questions about whether natural mishap alone can explain their absence. Speculation adds further intrigue. Could some of these dispatches have been intercepted and deliberately hidden by enemy agents, only to be quietly destroyed to prevent disclosure? Was there internal betrayal, with individuals within the Patriot network taking advantage of the chaos for personal or political gain? Some historians suggest that portions of Morgan's correspondence may have been deliberately suppressed, perhaps to conceal intelligence strategies, protect informants, or obscure the identities of those involved in espionage. The absence of these messages leaves an almost ghostly imprint. We know something was carried, but we do not know exactly what. Eyewitness accounts and secondary references hint at both human and environmental factors. Couriers describe dense forests and treacherous terrain, where messages could be lost or stolen, yet they also speak of moments when dispatches simply vanished without explanation. Could these gaps indicate hidden networks of Loyalist informants operating along known routes, or perhaps covert operations by the Continental Army to mislead the enemy, intentionally leaving false traces or disappearing real intelligence to maintain advantage? The uncertainty is part of the mystery itself. The human stakes were immediate and tangible. Missing dispatches could delay reinforcements, misinform commanders, or prevent critical supplies from reaching the front lines. Every lost message represented potential risk to soldiers' lives, strategic positions, and the fragile cohesion of the revolutionary effort. Morgan himself is said to have expressed frustration at lost correspondence, though his meticulous notes offer few clues as to their ultimate fate. The silence of these dispatches echoes as a silent witness to the vulnerabilities of 18th century military communication. The disappearance of Morgan's dispatches also underscores the ephemeral nature of documentation in wartime. Even careful preparation, encoded messages, and trusted couriers could be thwarted by circumstance, accident, or intentional obstruction. What we know about these dispatches comes from scattered letters, second-hand accounts, and incomplete records, remnants of activity that once moved swiftly through forests, towns, and camps, now reduced to hints and shadows. As we consider the vanished dispatches, one cannot help but wonder, what secrets did they carry? Were they intercepted and destroyed, hidden deliberately by friends or foes, or lost to the merciless conditions of war? And how might the outcome of certain campaigns, decisions of officers, or fates of units have shifted if these messages had reached their intended hands? In the quiet absence of Morgan's correspondence, history preserves its mystery, inviting us to ponder the unseen currents that shaped the Revolutionary War and the invisible threads of intelligence that, even now, remain tantalizingly out of reach. From the vanished dispatches of Captain James Morgan, we turn now to one of the most enduring enigmas of the Revolutionary War, the disappearance of gold shipments entrusted to the fledgling Continental Army. Across multiple campaigns, from the northern forts to southern ports, gold intended to pay soldiers, fund operations, or secure essential supplies simply vanished. Sometimes entirely, sometimes partially, leaving an intricate trail of unanswered questions and whispered speculation. Imagine a coastal dock in 1777, shrouded in fog. The air smells of salt and tar, with the distant creak of ships' masts and the muted shuffle of laborers unloading crates. Heavy chests glint faintly in the lantern light, their metal bindings catching the flicker. Each chest represents months of labor, correspondence with distant allies, and the trust of men who risked their lives to secure independence. Yet, despite guarded convoys, careful accounting, and the vigilance of military escorts, some shipments never reached their intended destinations. Letters note delayed arrivals or missing consignments, but the fate of the gold itself is often unrecorded, leaving only a whisper of its journey through time. Historical accounts provide some context. The Continental Congress, struggling to sustain an army without an established treasury, relied heavily on gold and silver to pay soldiers and procure vital supplies. Documents reference shipments moved by wagon, riverboat, or horse courier. Some consignments were attacked by enemy forces, others lost to accidents on rough terrain or over treacherous river crossings. Yet the pattern of loss is irregular and puzzling. Certain shipments disappear without a trace, as if evaporating from the record entirely. Were these gaps purely a matter of circumstance, or something more deliberate? Mainstream explanations suggest a combination of theft, mismanagement, and logistical hazard. The chaos of war, combined with the limited means of transportation and communication, made secure transfer of valuables exceptionally difficult. Wagon routes were long, roads were uneven, and escort parties were often small and vulnerable. But even accounting for these factors, some cases of vanished gold defy straightforward explanation. Entire shipments, documented as dispatched from secure locations, never appear in ledgers or letters reporting receipt. No trace remains, and no explanation is recorded. Speculative theories add layers to the mystery. Could enemy agents have intercepted some shipments, diverting them to hidden caches or melting them down for clandestine circulation? Were certain consignments deliberately hidden by Patriot officers, either to safeguard funds from internal corruption or to fund covert operations whose records were never intended to survive? Some suggest that local sympathizers or opportunistic brigands might have exploited wartime chaos to seize gold, leaving no trace beyond fleeting rumors and ambiguous reports. The fact that multiple shipments vanished across regions suggests a combination of human intervention and misfortune, an intertwining of risk, strategy, and perhaps deliberate secrecy. The psychological weight of these missing shipments cannot be overstated. Soldiers often went unpaid, supplies lagged behind the front, and morale suffered as uncertainty mounted. Each vanished chest carried not only monetary value, but the promise of sustenance, wages, and survival. What could have been hidden within the lost gold, the potential to arm troops, secure loyalty, or influence the course of engagements, remains speculative, yet the implications of these losses reverberated through the ranks and over campaigns. Eyewitness accounts, when they exist, are tantalizing but fragmentary. Port records occasionally note the loading of heavy crates, while letters hint at the urgency and peril surrounding their transport. Yet in multiple cases, correspondence abruptly ends, leaving no record of delivery, theft, or misplacement. Could these gaps indicate secretive retrieval, clandestine redistribution, or deliberate erasure to obscure sensitive operations? The absence of clear answers keeps the mystery alive. The story of missing Revolutionary War gold illustrates the intersection of material reality and historical ambiguity. Chests of coins and ingots, moved with care and secrecy, become symbols of the limits of record-keeping under duress. They remind us that even in a well-documented conflict, some movements remain hidden, some decisions unrecorded, and some acts of human cunning or misfortune leave only traces in shadows and fragments. As we reflect on these vanished shipments, one cannot help but wonder, who ultimately claimed them, if anyone? Were they destroyed, repurposed, or absorbed into hidden channels of influence and funding? And how might the outcomes of battles, the decisions of commanders, or the lives of ordinary soldiers have been affected had these chests reached their intended hands? In the silence of missing gold, the Revolutionary War whispers secrets we may never fully uncover, reminding us that history often preserves outcome while leaving the mechanics of fortune and misfortune shrouded in mystery. From the vanished gold shipments that once promised sustenance and strategic advantage, we turn now to another layer of revolutionary mystery: the disappearance of battlefield graves. Across the colonies, sites that should have held the remains of soldiers, men who fell in the brutal engagements of the war, sometimes bear little or no trace of human resting places. The absence of these graves leaves questions not only about record-keeping and logistics, but also about the ways in which memory, war, and human action intersect with the land itself. Picture a rolling field in New Jersey, thick with summer grasses and dotted with wildflowers, the faint outline of a ridge where muskets might have cracked and cannon fire echoed decades earlier. In what should be quiet sanctuaries of the fallen, soil remains largely undisturbed, and markers, if any existed, have long since disappeared. Contemporary accounts reference hastily dug graves, shallow trenches, or mass burials following battles, yet archaeological surveys in several locations reveal only fragments, scattered bones, partial coffin remnants, or occasionally nothing at all. What happened to these men after death, and why does the evidence vanish so completely? Historical explanations point to the chaos of war and subsequent development. Battlefields were not always respected as sacred spaces, particularly in the midst of ongoing conflict or when retreating forces had to abandon sites quickly. Bodies may have been moved, shallow graves disturbed by livestock, floodwaters, or the natural processes of erosion over decades. In some cases, urban expansion or farming practices may have obliterated evidence, turning soil into roads, foundations, or cultivated land. Yet while these factors explain some disappearance, they cannot account for all instances, particularly those in remote or less developed areas where no visible traces remain. Speculative theories add a more enigmatic dimension. Could some graves have been deliberately hidden, or relocated to conceal the scale of loss, or to prevent bodies from falling into enemy hands? Were certain soldiers' remains removed by local populations for reasons now lost to history, perhaps out of superstition, vengeance, or political necessity? Some historians suggest that early accounts of mass graves were exaggerated, or conversely, understated, leaving us uncertain whether the men perished at all in the locations later reported. In any case, the discrepancy between written records and physical evidence deepens the mystery. Eyewitness accounts, when they exist, are strikingly inconsistent. Letters from officers describe makeshift burials upon the field, or dug under moonlight, often without the means to mark graves or preserve them. Militia recollections speak of hurried interments followed by immediate retreats or redeployments. Even when markers were placed, wooden crosses, stone cairns, or simple mounds, few survived the decades of exposure and human activity. The gaps between observation, recording, and preservation raise questions about the accuracy of contemporary documentation and whether some graves were lost intentionally or by accident. The missing graves carry profound psychological and cultural weight. They leave families, comrades, and communities without closure, and challenge historians to reconcile accounts of heroic sacrifice with the stark absence of evidence. Each vanished burial represents more than a missing physical trace. It is a rupture in collective memory, an unanswered question about who these men were, where they fell, and what became of them afterward. The silence of the soil speaks as loudly as any historical document might, inviting reflection on both human error and deliberate choice. Even the landscape itself complicates the picture. Soil erosion, river shifts, and forest regrowth over nearly 250 years obscure evidence, yet some sites remain surprisingly undisturbed. Why do some graves survive as markers and memorials, while others are entirely lost? Were there intentional acts of preservation by local communities, or did chance alone dictate survival? And what secrets might lie still beneath the surface, hidden under layers of sediment, vegetation, and centuries of human activity, waiting for discovery? The disappearance of battlefield graves underscores the fragility of historical evidence. War consumes more than lives. It alters memory, geography, and material record. Yet the absence of graves does not erase the events themselves, nor the impact on those who witnessed them. Instead, it leaves us with questions that cannot be fully answered, encouraging careful consideration of both documented history and the spaces where history seems to vanish entirely. As we reflect on these lost resting places, one is compelled to ask, what became of the men who fell on these fields? Were they moved, deliberately concealed, or simply claimed by time and nature? And how might our understanding of the Revolutionary War shift if these silent witnesses could speak, revealing truths that have eluded documentation and archaeology for centuries? The vanished graves of the Revolution remain a haunting reminder that even in well-studied conflicts, mysteries persist beneath the surface, whispering their secrets to those willing to listen. From the vanished battlefield graves, we now turn to the open seas, where another layer of revolutionary mystery unfolds: the disappearance of naval ships that once sailed under the Continental flag. Across the Atlantic coastline and inland waterways, vessels commissioned to defend, transport, and supply the fledgling American Navy vanished with little trace. The mystery of these lost ships, their crews, and their cargoes remains a haunting testament to the perils of war, the unpredictability of the ocean, and the shadows of secrecy that often accompanied naval operations. Picture a fog-laden harbor in 1777, the smell of salt and tar hanging thick in the air. Masts creak against a pale dawn sky, sails flapping idly in an uncertain wind. On the deck of a continental sloop, sailors move with careful precision, checking ropes and gunpowder stores, aware that storms, enemy patrols, and treacherous currents await beyond the breakwater. Despite meticulous planning and vigilance, some ships disappeared entirely from records. Assigned to convoy duty, reconnaissance, or blockades, they simply failed to reach their destinations, leaving no explanation, no wreckage, and often no survivors. Historical records note several instances of missing ships. Logs show planned departures, scheduled arrivals, and detailed instructions for transport of troops, arms, and supplies. In some cases, letters from commanding officers express frustration at the loss of vessels, citing gaps in communication and the potentially catastrophic implications for ongoing operations. Yet, in many instances, the fate of these ships is entirely unknown. Did they succumb to storms, capsizing silently in uncharted waters? Were they intercepted and destroyed by British forces, their remains never recorded? Or did human error and the limitations of 18th century navigation leave them stranded, lost, and forgotten? Mainstream explanations often focus on environmental hazards. Hurricanes, sudden squalls, and unpredictable coastal currents posed constant danger. Wooden hulls, though well crafted, could not always withstand storms, nor could inexperienced or overextended crews navigate treacherous shoals. Ship logs sometimes report lost at sea or failed to return, a factual acknowledgement that offers no insight into the precise circumstances, leaving historians to reconstruct events from fragmentary evidence. Yet there are aspects of these disappearances that resist purely natural explanations. Some ships vanished under calm conditions or while operating near known ports and harbors, where storms alone seem unlikely. Could acts of sabotage or clandestine capture account for some losses? Reports suggest that Loyalist sympathizers, privateers, or even internal dissent within crews may have contributed to unexplained disappearances. Were some ships intentionally diverted, their cargoes appropriated, or their movements concealed to mislead the enemy or protect sensitive operations? The lack of surviving documentation or eyewitness testimony leaves these questions unanswered, echoing across centuries. Eyewitness accounts, when they exist, offer tantalizing but incomplete glimpses. Sailors' diaries mention sudden squalls that seem to strike out of nowhere, while local residents along the coast report seeing ships vanish into fog, never to reappear. Rumors circulated of entire crews lost without a trace, and some letters hint at secret missions cloaked in ambiguity. Could coded intelligence or smuggling operations have contributed to these losses? Did some vessels meet clandestine fates, their disappearance serving strategic purposes that were never recorded publicly? The disappearance of naval ships carried consequences both immediate and symbolic. Each lost vessel represented men lost to the sea, supplies delayed or destroyed, and missions left incomplete. Morale suffered, and confidence in continental naval strategy was shaken. Yet the absence of precise details has also left a powerful historical enigma. How many ships went missing simply due to misfortune, and how many were swallowed by deeper, less visible forces at play in the chaos of war? The ocean, with its vast and unforgiving expanse, preserves few clues. Sunken ships decay, shifting sands bury timbers, and centuries of sediment cover any remnants that might once have told a story. Even when wreckage is eventually discovered, the reasons for its loss, storm, battle, or human intervention, may remain elusive. Each vanished ship becomes a ghostly reminder of the limits of our understanding, a silent vessel carrying unanswered questions beneath the waves. As we consider these lost ships of the Revolutionary War, one is compelled to wonder, where did they go, and what secrets did they carry? Were some taken by enemy hands, some claimed by storms, and others swallowed by human intrigue? And how might the course of naval engagements, supply lines, and military strategy have shifted had these ships survived? In the mystery of missing vessels, the revolutionary seas hold their secrets still, whispering to us across time, challenging us to reconcile recorded history with the silence left by what has vanished without a trace. From the vanished naval vessels that once patrolled the coastlines, we now turn to a quieter yet equally compelling mystery, the hidden location of the Liberty Tree relics. In Boston, in the heart of a city teeming with colonial fervor, the Liberty Tree once stood as a living emblem of resistance, a towering elm whose branches bore the weight of revolutionary spirit. Beneath its shade, patriots convened in secret, affixing broadsides, declaring grievances, and fostering a sense of unity against British authority. Today, the tree itself is gone, felled by Loyalist forces in 1775. But questions remain. What became of the relics, the symbols, and the fragments associated with this legendary tree? Imagine the bustling streets of 18th century Boston, muddy with horse-drawn carriages and lined with colonial shops. In a small, discreet gathering under the Liberty Tree, the air thick with anticipation, citizens pressed pamphlets into hands, tied ribbons to its limbs, or left small tokens as silent messages of defiance. These objects, some inscribed, some carved, others merely symbolic, embodied the hopes and courage of those willing to risk imprisonment or worse. Yet when the tree was cut down, what became of these relics? Contemporary accounts mention hurried removals, frantic preservation by sympathetic patriots, and perhaps clandestine smuggling to safe locations. Beyond these hints, the trail grows faint, leaving a gap in history that continues to intrigue scholars and enthusiasts alike. Historical records provide partial glimpses. Broadside announcements, eyewitness letters, and early 19th century recollections reference pieces of the Liberty Tree, shavings, ribbons, or portions of bark that were kept by families, hidden in attics, or passed down secretly. Some were reportedly gifted to dignitaries or hidden in private collections. Yet over time, documentation fades, objects disappear, and the precise locations of these relics remain unknown. Even artifacts authenticated in later centuries sometimes carry uncertain provenance, raising questions about whether they truly originate from the original Liberty Tree or from other trees associated with revolutionary symbolism. Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. Could some relics have been deliberately concealed to protect them from confiscation, never to resurface again? Were they buried in secret caches, or perhaps incorporated into household objects to disguise their significance? Some suggest that certain items were taken beyond Boston, moved along clandestine networks to avoid British seizure, leaving a trail that may have stretched across colonies and even overseas. Could a portion of the relics have survived in private hands, their significance lost to memory as generations passed? The possibility of undiscovered remnants hidden in attics, basements, or even buried beneath city streets keeps historians and treasure hunters alike searching. Eyewitness accounts, when available, are tantalizing yet fragmentary. Letters from patriots describe hurried salvaging operations under the threat of Loyalist retaliation. Local journals hint at artifacts passed secretly from hand to hand, yet rarely offer specifics beyond vague references to shavings from the tree or ribbons of liberty. These traces suggest a pattern of careful concealment, but the precise methods and final destinations remain elusive. Could some relics have been destroyed to prevent their capture? Or might some survive, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be identified centuries later? The cultural weight of the Liberty Tree relics adds a deeper dimension to the mystery. They are not merely physical objects, but symbols of defiance, unity, and courage. The loss or concealment of these artifacts reflects both the dangers of open resistance and the lengths to which patriots went to preserve their ideals. Each vanished relic represents a tangible connection to the collective spirit of the Revolution, and their absence invites reflection on the ways history is preserved, altered, or lost entirely. Even modern investigations have yielded only partial results. Archaeologists and historians have examined urban plots, attics, and private collections for traces of the Liberty Tree, occasionally finding fragments attributed to it. Yet most discoveries are contested, and the majority of relics remain unlocated, their stories buried beneath centuries of urban growth, shifting property lines, and the natural decay of organic materials. The question lingers: how many artifacts from that iconic elm survive in some forgotten chest or hidden compartment, waiting for rediscovery? As we consider the missing relics of the Liberty Tree, one is drawn to ponder. What became of these symbols of revolutionary zeal? Were they deliberately hidden, lost to neglect, or destroyed in the turbulence of war? And if they still exist, might their rediscovery shed new light on the networks, decisions, and personal sacrifices of those who dared to act beneath its branches? The Liberty Tree itself may be gone, but in the mystery surrounding its relics, the echoes of defiance, secrecy, and courage endure, reminding us that even when history seems silent, traces of the past can still whisper to those willing to listen. From the relics of the Liberty Tree, we turn now to the quiet fields of Virginia in 1781, where a puzzling silence descended over the French forces allied with the Continental Army. As the Revolutionary War approached its climactic confrontation at Yorktown, an odd and unexplained stillness settled across the encampments, a calm that contrasted sharply with the thunderous echoes of previous battles. This strange quiet has intrigued historians for centuries, raising questions about the movements, intentions, and strategies of troops whose presence would prove decisive, yet whose activity remained surprisingly muted in the days leading up to the siege. Imagine the rolling fields along the York River, bathed in the soft glow of an autumn sunrise. French soldiers, clad in blue and white uniforms, stand in formation, their muskets polished but still, their banners snapping quietly in a gentle breeze. The usual sounds of military life, marching boots, orders shouted across the lines, the hammering of blacksmiths, are subdued, almost eerily absent. Campfires burn steadily, yet the usual bustle of soldiers tending to supplies or practicing maneuvers is limited. For those observing from a distance, the scene evokes a sense of expectation, tension, and, most puzzlingly, stillness, as if the army itself were holding its breath. Contemporary accounts provide glimpses of this curious quiet. Letters from American officers note that French forces appeared unusually disciplined, yet strangely inactive in the days before coordinated assaults. Some mention that scouts and couriers encountered minimal patrol activity, and that reconnaissance reports were oddly scant, while most historians attribute this to deliberate strategic positioning, waiting for the optimal moment to advance, to synchronize with naval forces, or to avoid alerting the British. The lack of detailed records leaves gaps that invite speculation. Why, in such a critical period, did the French troops move so quietly, almost invisibly, across the Virginia landscape? Mainstream interpretations focus on practical military considerations. The French army, under Rochambeau, was coordinating closely with Washington's Continental forces, timing movements to maximize surprise and ensure supply lines remained secure. Slow marches, concealed encampments, and muted activity would have been tactical measures, designed to mask intentions and protect the army from premature detection. Yet, even with this explanation, the near-total absence of documented engagements, skirmishes, or other activities prior to Yorktown remains striking. Could there be more to this silence than mere strategy? Speculative theories offer a range of possibilities. Some suggest that secret reconnaissance missions or covert communications with Loyalist informants may have required unusual secrecy, limiting observable troop activity. Others wonder whether environmental or logistical factors played a hidden role. Unrecorded delays due to illness, supply shortages, or unfamiliar terrain could have contributed to the quiet, yet were intentionally omitted from official reports to preserve morale and the appearance of control. Could there even have been deliberate diversionary measures, with certain units remaining hidden to mislead British intelligence while the main army repositioned? The true extent of these unseen maneuvers is impossible to measure, leaving historians to infer from the limited evidence available. Eyewitness descriptions, when they exist, convey a sense of mystery rather than clarity. Local residents recalled seeing long lines of troops moving at dawn or dusk, gliding through the mist in near silence, their presence noted only by the faint glimmer of bayonets or the muffled sound of distant orders. Some accounts mention the sudden appearance of tents in previously open fields, only to vanish days later, leaving no record of which units occupied them. Such observations hint at a level of operational subtlety that was extraordinary for the period, reinforcing the perception of purposeful yet enigmatic inactivity. The silence also had psychological and symbolic weight. For the Continental officers observing their allies, the stillness may have conveyed discipline, patience, and an almost ritualistic calm before the storm of battle. For the British, unaware of the French positioning, it may have created uncertainty and unease, a subtle form of intimidation. Yet in both cases, the precise reasons for this quiet, whether tactical genius, logistical necessity, or something less tangible, remain partially obscured, leaving room for interpretation and reflection. As we consider the mysterious calm of the French forces before Yorktown, one cannot help but ask, Was this silence merely a calculated strategy, or were there hidden forces at play, elements of chance, discretion, or intelligence that history has failed to fully capture? And if the stillness concealed more than we know, what secrets of planning, coordination, or subtle subterfuge might have passed unrecorded, leaving only the echo of a quiet army poised for decisive action? In the fields of Yorktown, the whispers of this strange silence persist, a reminder that even in moments of apparent calm, history can conceal as much as it reveals. From the muted preparation of French forces at Yorktown, we turn now to the dense forests and winding rivers of the American interior, where another layer of secrecy unfolded: agreements with native tribes whose existence was never recorded. In the Revolutionary War, diplomacy was as crucial as muskets and cannon, and yet much of the dialogue between colonial leaders and indigenous nations remains hidden, leaving tantalizing gaps in our understanding. What pacts were struck in shadowed clearings or along secluded riverbanks? Which promises were whispered in confidence, and why were they never committed to paper? Picture a quiet river bend at dawn, the mist rising off the water as a small contingent of colonial emissaries meets with tribal leaders. The air carries the scent of damp earth and pine, and the sound of lapping water is punctuated by the distant call of birds. In this remote setting, words are exchanged that will never appear in formal records: pledges of support, agreements to guide or mislead, subtle assurances of neutrality or alliance. These conversations, conducted far from the scrutiny of the Continental Congress or British observers, were ephemeral, existing only in memory, carried in the minds of those present. Verified history confirms that many tribes aligned with one side or the other, but documentation is often incomplete or deliberately vague. The Oneida, Tuscarora, and Cherokee nations, among others, engaged with both American and British representatives, sometimes simultaneously. Letters, diaries, and official reports hint at the alliances, yet countless interactions remain unmentioned. Why were these agreements left unrecorded? Was it a strategic choice, meant to protect sensitive negotiations from enemy intelligence? Or did the nature of trust in these interactions, rooted in oral tradition rather than written contracts, simply escape the colonial bureaucracy's attention? Mainstream historians suggest practical explanations. Secrecy protected parties from reprisal, and reliance on oral commitments reflected indigenous cultural norms. But the gaps in the record invite speculation. Could there have been more intricate arrangements involving coordinated movements, diversionary tactics, or the provision of critical intelligence to American forces? Might entire campaigns have relied on these unrecorded partnerships, their success owed in part to clandestine guidance from native scouts and diplomats whose contributions were never formally acknowledged? Eyewitness and secondary accounts offer glimpses of these hidden dealings. Some journals describe emissaries traveling through remote passes to meet tribal councils, bearing gifts, letters, or symbols of allegiance. Observers occasionally noted sudden absences of tribal warriors or unexpected support in skirmishes, yet the reasons behind these actions were rarely disclosed. Could these incidents point to secret understandings that were intentionally kept from public or military record? And if so, how many pivotal moments in the Revolution were influenced by unseen hands operating in silence? Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. Some historians propose that secret pacts may have involved conditional agreements, assistance contingent on future concessions, promises of land, or guarantees of autonomy. Others suggest that certain tribes may have used these covert channels to maintain leverage, balancing relationships with both Americans and British in a complex web of diplomacy. If records were intentionally omitted, or simply never created, the precise scope and content of these negotiations will remain hidden, leaving only the evidence of outcomes. sudden troop movements, unexpected supply routes, or shifts in local allegiances that shaped battles and campaigns. The psychological dimension of these secret agreements is equally compelling. For colonial leaders, the knowledge of unseen allies could provide confidence or a sense of security. For native leaders, maintaining secrecy allowed strategic flexibility and protection against retribution. Yet this very secrecy contributes to the modern mystery. How much of the Revolutionary War's narrative has been shaped by unrecorded dialogues, and how many of the triumphs or setbacks attributed to luck, timing, or visible strategy were in fact influenced by these hidden negotiations? Even today, the traces of these lost agreements are difficult to discern. Oral histories passed down within indigenous communities occasionally hint at participation in revolutionary campaigns, but the details remain fragmentary. Archaeological evidence may corroborate movement or occupation of sites, yet the intent and context of these actions are elusive. The absence of formal documentation leaves historians reliant on inference, conjecture, and careful reading between the lines of sparse records, highlighting the profound limits of what can be known. As we reflect on the secret agreements with native tribes that were never recorded, one is compelled to consider how many decisions, movements, and outcomes of the Revolutionary War were quietly shaped by these unspoken alliances. Which critical choices were influenced by promises known only to those present in forest clearings or along hidden rivers? And if these conversations were deliberately concealed, what does that tell us about the nature of trust, diplomacy, and survival in a world at war? The shadows of these unseen agreements linger, reminding us that even in well-studied history, some truths remain just beyond reach, waiting for the curious to wonder what might still be hidden. From the secret negotiations with native tribes, we move to the bustling streets and alleys of 1770s Philadelphia, a city alive with revolutionary fervor yet shadowed by whispered dissent. Among the printed tracts, broadsides, and pamphlets that circulated widely, a small but provocative series of Loyalist publications stirred intense controversy. These pamphlets, brimming with inflammatory rhetoric, condemned the Patriot cause and sought to undermine morale. But for centuries, the identity of the author, or authors, has remained a mystery, leaving historians to wonder who orchestrated these campaigns of words and persuasion in a city at the heart of revolution. Imagine a candle-lit printing press tucked away on a narrow, cobblestoned street. The scent of ink and paper mingles with the faint smoke from nearby hearths, and the rhythmic clatter of type being set fills the air. In this dimly lit workshop, someone, perhaps a solitary figure or a small cadre of conspirators, meticulously composes tracts designed to provoke, incite, and influence. The pamphlets, unsigned and carefully distributed, are meant to spread fear, doubt, and uncertainty among the city's patriots. Who was this shadowy figure? A disgruntled merchant, a covert British agent, or an anonymous loyalist trying to sway the hearts and minds of their neighbors? Historical records confirm the existence of these pamphlets and the public reaction they inspired. Contemporary accounts describe fervent debates in taverns and public squares, with citizens tearing into each other over loyalty and patriotism. Some pamphlets accused revolutionaries of hypocrisy, lawlessness, or treachery, while others threatened subtle retribution or praised British governance. Yet, despite the evident impact, no signatures, letters, or formal acknowledgments reveal the author's identity. Could it be that the secrecy was deliberate, part of a broader strategy to avoid reprisal or maintain plausible deniability? Or was it a matter of necessity, protecting individuals in a city teetering on the brink of internal conflict? Mainstream historians suggest practical explanations. Anonymity was common in politically charged publications, particularly in wartime. Fear of imprisonment, social ostracism, or violent retaliation would have been real deterrents to public attribution. Yet, the sheer sophistication and rhetorical precision of these pamphlets suggest more than casual dissent. Could these works have been coordinated from beyond Philadelphia, perhaps directed by British intelligence or Loyalist networks operating in secret? Some contemporary correspondences hint at funding and guidance from distant sources, but the details are frustratingly incomplete, leaving only tantalizing clues. Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. One posits that the author may have been a figure with intimate knowledge of both the city's social fabric and the revolutionary leadership, a trusted insider capable of crafting persuasive narratives without detection. Another suggests that multiple writers, working collaboratively yet anonymously, could have produced a series of pamphlets designed to simulate a widespread Loyalist sentiment, amplifying fear through the illusion of numbers and consensus. Could these unseen manipulators have shaped public perception in ways we are only beginning to glimpse through surviving fragments? The effects of these anonymous publications were tangible. Patriot leaders, aware of the incendiary content, expressed frustration and concern in private letters, noting the confusion and hesitation these tracts inspired among citizens and soldiers alike. They feared that the pamphlets could incite violence, discourage enlistment, or even provoke loyalty shifts in critical neighborhoods. Yet, despite the alarm, the trail leading to the author remained cold, disappearing into the fog of clandestine operations, unrecorded conversations, and secret printing practices. Eyewitness descriptions, when available, are fragmentary and enigmatic. Local residents recalled seeing suspicious individuals slipping parcels of pamphlets into doorways, leaving stacks on benches, or posting them under the cover of night. These fleeting glimpses suggest deliberate, careful dissemination, yet the identities of those involved remain unknown. Were these men or women acting alone, or were they part of a coordinated Loyalist network with broader ambitions? The answers, like the shadows that accompanied their movements, are obscured by time. The mystery carries both historical and psychological weight. In a city teeming with information yet rife with uncertainty, the anonymity of the pamphlet author allowed their words to spread unchecked, shaping perceptions and amplifying doubt. The lack of attribution leaves modern historians to ask, how many pivotal decisions, strategic choices, or shifts in allegiance were influenced by this unseen hand? Could the revolutionary struggle have unfolded differently if these provocations had been traced and neutralized at the time? And beyond practical considerations, what does this unresolved question reveal about the nature of influence, secrecy, and power during a conflict defined by loyalty and ideology? As we reflect on the unknown author of Philadelphia's inflammatory Loyalist pamphlets, one cannot help but wonder, who was this shadowy figure, and what motivated them to risk so much for the power of words alone? Was it ideology, personal grievance, financial reward, or something more inscrutable? And if we may never know their identity, how many other voices, anonymous, hidden, or erased, shaped the revolution in ways history has yet to fully uncover? The echoes of those unsigned pages remain, a reminder that even in a city of letters, newspapers, and official records, some stories are deliberately left untold, lingering in the margins, waiting to be imagined. As Philadelphia's streets echoed with the clandestine activity of pamphleteers and anonymous voices, another, more formal endeavor unfolded within the quiet chambers of the Continental Congress. It was July of 1775, and the colonies teetered on the edge between rebellion and reconciliation. In the midst of rising tensions, a document emerged, one of extraordinary significance and delicate intention, the Olive Branch Petition. Drafted as a final attempt to avert full-scale war with Britain, it embodied both hope and uncertainty, a fragile plea for peace in a time of mounting distrust. Yet, curiously, the original draft of this historic petition has vanished, leaving only copies and references to its content, and igniting questions that have endured for centuries. Picture the scene: a candlelit room within Congress, the air heavy with the scent of ink and parchment. Delegates, many of them weary from the weight of political deliberation, gathered around a sturdy wooden table. Quills scratched against paper as arguments were tempered into carefully chosen words, designed to convey loyalty to the crown while simultaneously asserting colonial rights. Every phrase, every sentence carried immense consequence. The stakes were unimaginable, and yet, despite the meticulous crafting, the document that might have revealed the raw intentions, early edits, and private debates, the first draft, has disappeared. How could a paper of such significance vanish without a trace? We know from surviving correspondence and recorded debates that the petition was carefully prepared and ultimately dispatched to London. Copies were made, reviewed, and revised, yet the very first iteration, the initial draft penned by John Dickinson and other key figures, has eluded historians. Some suggest it may have been deliberately destroyed to prevent political fallout or to shield certain delegates from criticism. Others propose that it was lost amid the chaos of revolutionary activity, boxes of papers displaced, moved or damaged during troop movements, and the ever-shifting governmental operations in Philadelphia. But such practical explanations leave lingering unease. A document so pivotal, a potential blueprint of the colony's final attempt at conciliation, disappearing entirely. The circumstances invite speculation. Could there have been more to the disappearance than mere accident? Some scholars have pondered whether factions within the Congress may have deliberately withheld or destroyed the draft, wary that its contents might reveal internal dissent or disagreements over strategy. Might early drafts have expressed positions too conciliatory or too radical, threatening to undermine unity if exposed? Could copies have been intercepted or suppressed by British agents seeking to exploit any fracture in colonial solidarity? The historical record is tantalizingly incomplete, leaving these questions unresolved, their answers hidden in the shadows of time. The very nature of the lost draft is a source of fascination. In the existing copies, we see the polished language, the formal gestures of diplomacy, the careful negotiation of tone and principle. Yet one cannot help but wonder, did the original bear traces of hesitation, of edits and crossings out, of raw emotion untempered by political prudence? Might it have revealed the private frustrations of Dickinson or the anxious debates of Congress, details that could illuminate the personal and collective struggles behind this final olive branch? In its absence, the draft becomes a ghostly presence in the historical record, a silent witness to events we can only partially reconstruct. Speculative theories abound, though none can be verified. Some suggest that the draft may have been spirited away to protect it from British authorities, stored secretly by sympathetic allies, and subsequently lost to history. Others imagine that it might have survived, hidden within private collections, misfiled or misidentified, waiting to be rediscovered centuries later. Could it be that the original draft lies unrecognized in some archive, miscatalogued among routine correspondence, its significance unappreciated? The possibility remains, elusive yet hauntingly real. The disappearance of the Olive Branch Petition's original draft is more than a mere archival curiosity. It underscores the fragility of historical memory and the interplay between secrecy, politics, and preservation. It reminds us that the story of the Revolution is not only shaped by battles and proclamations, but also by the documents that have survived and those that have not. In the case of the Olive Branch Petition, the absence of the first draft transforms it into a mystery that is at once historical and human, reflecting the fears, intentions, and uncertainties of those who risked everything to chart a course between war and peace. As we reflect on this vanished document, one cannot help but ask, What insights might it have contained? Could it have altered our understanding of the earliest months of the conflict, the nuances of colonial diplomacy, or the personalities of the men who guided the fledgling nation? And if it is still out there, hidden in plain sight or lost to time, what might it reveal to the world if it were ever found? The mystery persists, a reminder that history is not only written in what survives but also in what has been lost, leaving us to wonder at the secrets that remain just beyond our reach.